Hello and welcome to the Snoozy Scientist, where we explore life's deepest secrets one sleepy yawn at a time. Tonight, we're drifting together into some of Earth's unsolved puzzles, mysteries that still leave scientists scratching their heads. Some are ancient wonders that don't fit neatly into our textbooks, places where massive stones stand too perfectly shaped to be chance, lost technologies that seem too advanced for their time, civilizations that rose and vanished without a trace, and artifacts so strange they make us wonder what else might be waiting, hidden in the shadows of history. Even with all our modern knowledge and tools, so many questions remain unanswered. Who built these things? Why do they exist? And what secrets might still be out there, just beneath our feet? Before we wander too far, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment and tell me what time it is wherever you're winding down. And if these gentle rambles help you drift off to dreamland, please tap like and consider subscribing. It keeps this little snoozy corner of the internet alive and cozy, and it means the world to have you here. Now fluff your pillow, take a slow deep breath, and settle in. Let's begin. 1. The Plain of Jars. Tucked away in the misty mountains of northern Laos lies a quiet mystery that has puzzled archaeologists and locals alike for centuries. Imagine wandering through a landscape where the grass sways gently in the breeze and the early morning fog clings to the hills, only to discover thousands of massive stone jars scattered across the fields like forgotten relics from an ancient dream. This is the Plain of Jars, one of the strangest and least understood archaeological sites on Earth. The Plain of Jars is not just one single field, but a whole region dotted with more than 90 different jar sites. Some fields contain only a handful of these enormous jars, while others are packed with hundreds. The largest jars stand taller than a grown person, reaching up to 10 feet high and weighing several tons each. Some are as small as kitchen barrels, while others are so large you could curl up inside them and listen to the world outside fade away. Each one carved from solid stone, mostly sandstone but sometimes granite or limestone, their surfaces weathered and lichen covered, telling the story of endless seasons passing by. What makes the Plain of Jars so strange is that no one really knows who made them or why. There are no written records that explain their origin, no carvings on the jars themselves, and no ancient documents buried nearby. They simply stand there, silent and enduring, guarding their secrets under the open sky. Some local legends speak of giants who once roamed the mountains and used the jars to brew rice wine to celebrate victories in battle. Others say the jars were funeral urns, used to hold the ashes of the dead or to decompose bodies before final burial elsewhere. Archaeologists have found human remains, beads, and burial artifacts near some jars, which adds weight to the theory that they played a role in ancient burial practices. But even with these clues, the true story remains just out of reach. Think for a moment about what it would have taken to create these jars. Each one was carved with simple tools, most likely chisels and hammers made of iron or even stone. Imagine ancient craftspeople spending weeks, maybe months, chipping away at boulders larger than a truck, shaping each jar with careful hands and skilled eyes. The work would have been backbreaking and time-consuming, but the real puzzle is how they moved them. Many of the quarries where the stones were sourced are miles away from where the jars now sit. Some jars appear on hilltops or open plains, far from any obvious quarry site. Without wheels, cranes, or modern machinery, how did these ancient builders transport these multi-ton monoliths across such rough terrain? Some researchers believe that the jars were rolled on logs, dragged by large groups of people using ropes and sledges. Others think they might have been floated part of the way during the rainy season when rivers swelled and turned the valleys into temporary waterways. But no theory fully explains how so many jars were moved and positioned with such consistency across such a vast region. It is a feat of planning and cooperation that still leaves modern engineers scratching their heads. The plane of jars is not just one puzzle, but many. Why are some jars clustered together while others stand alone in the middle of nowhere? Why are some lids missing, and what happened to them? Did the people who made the jars vanish due to war, famine, or migration? Or did they simply fade into new cultures, leaving their stone sentinels behind as silent witnesses to their passing? Adding to the mystery, the plain of jars is also scarred by a more recent tragedy. During the 20th century, the region was heavily bombed in a conflict that left behind thousands of unexploded ordnances scattered throughout the fields. Even today, local people live with the constant danger of hidden bombs buried just beneath the soil. Despite this, the jars still stand, enduring through centuries of weather, conflict, and human curiosity. When you see photos of the plain of jars, you might notice that each jar seems to have its own personality. Some tilt slightly, as if bowing to the earth. Others stand proud and straight, catching the light of dawn or the glow of sunset on their weathered rims. Farmers still graze their cattle among the jars, children play hide and seek around them, and travelers from around the world come to stand in the presence of this ancient enigma. Maybe that is the real wonder of the plain of jars. Not just the weight of the stones or the mystery of their purpose, but the way they make us pause and wonder how much of our own past is still waiting to be understood. They remind us that the earth holds stories carved in stone and buried in fields, waiting quietly beneath the sky, patient until curious minds like yours come wandering by. And as you drift off tonight, you might imagine those lonely jars standing in the moonlight, keeping their secrets for just a little while longer. 2. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni. Hidden beneath the quiet streets of a Maltese suburb lies a place unlike anywhere else on Earth, a place where stone corridors echo with whispers from thousands of years ago, and a single note sung in the darkness can make your bones vibrate as if the walls themselves are singing back. This is the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, an ancient underground temple and burial site that has fascinated archaeologists, acousticians, and dreamers for over a century. The word Hypogeum means simply underground in Greek, but this labyrinth carved into the bedrock is far more than a cave. Discovered by accident in 1902, when workers were digging foundations for new houses, the Hypogeum revealed itself like a secret that had waited patiently for thousands of years to be found. Beneath ordinary homes and garden walls, an entire 3-level complex opened up. Corridors, chambers, staircases, and sanctuaries, all carved by hand from the island's soft limestone. The Hypogeum dates back to around 4000 BCE, making it one of the oldest underground temples and burial sites in the world. Generations of ancient people returned here to lay their dead to rest, to hold rituals we can only imagine, and perhaps to connect with something they believed existed beyond life. The chambers are layered one beneath the other, like the levels of some forgotten dream, each level darker and more secret than the one before. Light rarely touches the lowest chambers, where winding passages lead to small niches that may have once cradled offerings, bones, or sacred objects. But what sets the Hypogeum apart from other ancient sites is not just its age or its hidden beauty, it is the sound. Deep inside this stone temple is a chamber called the Oracle Room. It is not much to look at, a small vaulted space with curved walls and a niche carved into the stone. But if you stand in that chamber and speak or chant in a certain pitch, something remarkable happens. The sound resonates and echoes throughout the entire structure, vibrating at a frequency that seems to affect the human mind and body in mysterious ways. Acoustic experts have tested the oracle room and found that it naturally amplifies sound at around 110 hertz, a frequency known to stimulate parts of the brain associated with emotional processing. Some people who have stood inside and heard the echoes say they feel a kind of trance, as if their thoughts are drifting away on the waves of sound. It is an experience that is hard to describe. The walls seem to hum with your voice, and you feel the vibrations not just in your ears but in your chest and bones. Imagine a circle of ancient people chanting softly in the dim glow of flickering oil lamps. Their voices merge with the stone, swirling in the dark corridors and carrying their prayers or secrets from one chamber to the next. Why did the builders of the Hypogeum create this acoustic marvel? Was it deliberate, an early experiment in using sound to reach altered states of mind? Some researchers believe the oracle room was used by priests or shamans to deliver messages from the spirit world, their voices amplified and transformed into something otherworldly. Others think the entire temple may have been designed with acoustics in mind, using sound to guide rituals that helped people connect with ancestors or the divine. But as with so many ancient wonders, we have more questions than answers. No written records remain from the people who built the Hypogeum. All we have are the bones of the dead. Thousands of skeletal remains once lay within these chambers, and the red ochre paintings that still decorate some of the ceilings. Spirals, spots, and abstract shapes swirl above where worshippers may have gathered, symbols that may have held deep meaning, but which we can only guess at today. Over the years, the Hypogeum has revealed other secrets too. Small carved figurines, including the famous Sleeping Lady sculpture, have been found within its chambers. This tiny statue shows a woman resting peacefully on her side, eyes closed as if in a dream. Some believe she represents eternal sleep or a connection to the underworld. Others see her as a reminder that this place was both a tomb and a temple, a bridge between life and whatever lies beyond. Visiting the Hypogeum today feels like stepping out of time. Only a handful of people are allowed inside each day to protect the delicate environment from the damage caused by too much human breath and body heat. The air is cool and damp, heavy with the scent of ancient stone. Light filters through softly, casting shadows on walls that have not seen the sun in millennia. And if you stand still, you might hear the faint echo of your own heartbeat in the silence. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine this hidden temple deep beneath the homes and gardens of a small Maltese neighborhood. Picture the winding stairways, the carved chambers, and the oracle room where a single note can travel through the stone and linger long after the voice has fallen silent. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni is a reminder that our ancestors knew more than we often give them credit for, that sound, stone, and spirit could be woven together in ways that still whisper to us, if only we take the time to listen. 3. The Yonaguni Monument. Far beneath the clear blue waters off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan, a strange and silent world waits for those brave enough to dive deep and see it with their own eyes. This is the Yonaguni Monument, an underwater formation that has puzzled divers, geologists, and curious dreamers for decades. Some believe it is a breathtaking natural wonder shaped by ancient geological forces. Others insist it is a sunken city, the remains of a lost civilization swallowed by the sea thousands of years ago. Like so many of Earth's great puzzles, the truth may lie somewhere in between, waiting patiently beneath the waves. Yonaguni Island is the westernmost of Japan's inhabited islands, a place where strong currents swirl around rocky cliffs and where hammerhead sharks drift silently in the depths. In 1986, a local diver searching for new spots to see these sharks stumbled across something that would soon make Yonaguni famous. Beneath the rolling swells, he discovered a massive rock formation unlike anything he had ever seen before. From a distance, it looked like a series of giant steps carved into the ocean floor. As he swam closer, he saw long terraces, sharp right angles, and flat surfaces that seemed too precise to be the work of time and tide alone. Since then, divers from around the world have traveled to Yonaguni to see this underwater enigma for themselves. Some describe it as a submerged pyramid. Others see what look like broad platforms, stone stairways, and even roads leading off into the deeper blue. One of the most striking features is the so-called main terrace, a massive flat expanse that drops sharply down like the steps of an ancient ziggurat. In some places, walls rise straight up from the seabed, meeting each other at near perfect right angles. There is even an archway that looks as if it was carefully carved to create a passageway through solid rock. The question that keeps everyone wondering is simple but endlessly complex. Could nature have done this on its own? Some geologists argue that the Yonaguni Monument is a classic example of natural sandstone erosion. They point out that the area is made up of sedimentary rock, which naturally breaks along horizontal and vertical planes when exposed to strong currents and tectonic forces. Earthquakes are common around Yonaguni, and over thousands of years, they could have split and shifted the rock into its present shape. The sharp edges, they say, are no different than the cliffs and terraces we see above ground, carved by wind and rain instead of waves. But those who believe in an ancient sunken city find that explanation too simple. They point to the almost uncanny symmetry of the formations. The way certain surfaces are so smooth, they appear to have been polished, and the curious presence of what some claim are carved markings and symbols etched into the stone. Some divers say they have seen what looks like a massive stone face or a giant turtle carved into the rock. Others speak of pillar-like stones that stand upright, seemingly placed there with intention. One of the leading voices for the man-made theory is Professor Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist who has spent years studying Yonaguni. He argues that the site could be the remnants of an ancient civilization that thrived during the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower. If this is true, the structures would have been built on dry land more than 10,000 years ago, only to be submerged when the glaciers melted and the ocean rose to reclaim them. Kimura believes that the site could be linked to legends of Mu, a mythical lost continent similar to Atlantis, said to have existed in the Pacific before disappearing beneath the waves. Critics of this idea point out that no definitive artifacts have been found to support the claim of an ancient city. No pottery, tools, or signs of habitation have been recovered from the site, despite multiple dives and surveys. Some argue that our eyes are simply wired to see patterns and shapes, even when nature is the true artist. Our minds want to find order, to imagine temples and stairways where there may only be fractured stone. Still, there is something haunting about the Yonaguni Monument. To swim alongside its massive terraces is to feel as if you have entered another world, a place frozen between the past and the present. The water is clear and cold, and sunlight filters down in beams that dance across the stone surfaces. Schools of fish drift through the passageways, and the sound of your own breath echoes in your mind as you wonder who, if anyone, once walked these steps. Whether you believe Yonaguni is a lost city or a masterpiece of natural forces, one thing is certain: it reminds us how much of our own world remains unexplored and mysterious. Beneath the waves lie landscapes that could hold the stories of ancient peoples, or the beautiful randomness of nature's hidden art. Maybe it is not so important to know the answer with absolute certainty. Maybe the real wonder is in the mystery itself, the way these silent terraces make us pause and dream about what came before us and what might still be waiting in the deep blue shadows. So tonight, as you drift to sleep, imagine drifting down through the gentle currents off the coast of Japan, where the Yonaguni monument sits quietly on the ocean floor. Picture ancient stone steps stretching away into the depths, carrying their secrets in silence, patiently waiting for curious minds to come exploring once again. Gobekli Tepe, in the dry hills of southeastern Turkey, stands a place that rewrote everything we thought we knew about our ancient ancestors. Gobekli Tepe, whose name means potbelly hill in Turkish, might look like an unassuming mound from a distance, but hidden beneath its grassy slopes lies one of the most astonishing archaeological sites ever discovered. It is the world's oldest known monumental temple complex, built more than 11,000 years ago by people who, according to what we thought we knew, should not have been capable of such a thing. Long before the first cities rose from the plains of Mesopotamia, long before the wheel or written language, or even the beginnings of organized farming, there were hunter-gatherers who gathered on this hilltop to carve stone pillars taller than a man and heavier than a car. Each pillar was shaped and arranged with purpose, forming great stone circles that have stood the test of 12 millennia. When you stand among them today, it feels as if you are standing in the memory of the world itself. Gobekli Tepe was first brought to light in the 1960s, but back then, people assumed it was nothing more than an ancient cemetery. The stone circles were too old, too strange to fit into the known story of human civilization, so they were quietly marked on maps and left alone. It was not until the mid-1990s that German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt took a closer look and realized what lay beneath the earth. What he found would change our understanding of the human story forever. The site is made up of massive circular and oval enclosures, each one anchored by two central pillars surrounded by rings of more standing stones. Some pillars reach heights of 20 feet and weigh as much as 20 tons. The stones are decorated with intricate carvings, animals, abstract symbols, and humanoid figures etched into the limestone with astonishing precision. Lions, snakes, scorpions, wild boars, birds, a whole menagerie from a world that was wild and untamed. What is perhaps most baffling about Gobekli Tepe is not just its age or its size, but the people who built it. These were not settled farmers living in villages with organized labor and stable food supplies. They were nomadic hunter-gatherers who roamed the plains in small bands, following herds and gathering wild grains. To build Gobekli Tepe, they would have needed to gather hundreds of people in one place, feed them, organize them, and somehow move these enormous stones without wheels, beasts of burden, or metal tools. How did they do it? Some researchers believe that the people used simple but ingenious methods, rolling stones on logs, using ropes and manpower to drag them up the hill. Others think they may have used a system of sledges and wet clay to reduce friction. The truth is, we do not fully know, and maybe that is part of the magic that still clings to this place. There is another puzzle too. Why was it built in the first place? There are no signs that anyone ever lived at Gobekli Tepe. There are no hearths for daily cooking, no storage rooms, no houses tucked in between the pillars. It seems that people came here for something other than shelter or trade. Many believe it was a sacred place, a site for rituals and gatherings where people came together to share in ceremonies that we can only guess at. The animals carved into the stones might have been spirit guardians, or they might have represented the world of nature that surrounded and sustained these early people. Some believe the circles themselves might align with the stars, making Gobekli Tepe an ancient observatory as well as a temple. Whatever its purpose, the site shows us that the desire to gather and to believe in something greater than ourselves came before farming, before cities, and maybe even before true settled life. In a twist that only deepens the mystery, Gobekli Tepe was not simply abandoned and left to crumble. Thousands of years after it was built, the people who once gathered here carefully buried the stone circles under layers of earth and rubble, almost as if they wanted to protect or hide what they had made. It is this deliberate burial that preserved the carvings so well, giving us a window into a world long gone. But why bury it? Was it a change in belief, a new way of life, or something else entirely that made them turn their back on this sacred hill? Archaeologists have only excavated a small fraction of the site, and ground-penetrating radar suggests there could be dozens more circles waiting underground. Each new discovery adds another question to the puzzle, reminding us that the story of our past is far more complex and wondrous than we once believed. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine that hill under the Turkish stars, the ancient stones standing silently in the earth, their carvings still clear after thousands of years. Picture the people who gathered there so long ago, their fires flickering, their chants echoing in the night. They left behind no written words, only stone and symbol, and perhaps that is enough. Gobekli Tepe is a whisper from the dawn of humanity, reminding us that we have always been builders, dreamers, and keepers of mysteries too vast to fully explain.
The Piri Reis map.
Sometimes, the most astonishing mysteries are not buried deep in the earth or hidden beneath the sea, but tucked away in old libraries and forgotten archives, waiting for curious eyes to notice what others have missed. The Piri Reis map is one such puzzle. At first glance, it looks like any other map from the age of exploration, an era when sailors braved uncharted oceans and cartographers tried to make sense of newly discovered lands. But when you look closer, this fragile piece of gazelle skin parchment holds secrets that continue to baffle historians and geographers more than 500 years later. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis, who was both a respected navigator and a skilled cartographer, compiled this map. He did not claim to have drawn every coastline himself. In fact, he left handwritten notes along the edges, explaining that he pieced the map together using older charts. Some, he said, dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. Piri Reis gathered knowledge from sailors, ancient maps, and explorers of his day to make what he hoped would be the most complete chart of the world ever created under the Ottoman Empire. Much of the Piri Reis map shows familiar coastlines. You can trace the western coast of Africa and parts of Europe. You can see the northern coast of South America with remarkable accuracy for its time. But it is what appears along the lower edge of the map that has made it the center of one of history's greatest cartographic debates. There, stretching out beneath South America, is a landmass that many believe resembles the coastline of Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered until more than 300 years later in 1820. Even more astonishing is that the coastline on the map is drawn not as the frozen, ice-bound land we know today, but as an ice-free shore, with details suggesting mountains, inlets, and rivers. Modern geological studies have confirmed that the coastal outline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica would indeed match what the Piri Reis map depicts, but only if you could see it without its thick blanket of ice. According to these studies, the last time that part of Antarctica might have been ice-free was more than 6,000 years ago, long before any known civilization should have had the seafaring skills or knowledge to chart such a distant and inhospitable place? How did this knowledge find its way onto a map in 1513? Piri Reis himself claimed that some of his sources were ancient sea charts that he had inherited or gathered from other sailors. In his notes, he mentions using 20 older maps and 8 new ones from the Arab world and India. Some historians believe these ancient maps might have preserved knowledge from an earlier seafaring civilization, perhaps even one lost to history after a global catastrophe or gradual decline. Others think it is possible that the map has simply been misinterpreted, that what looks like Antarctica might actually be a distorted version of South America, drawn by someone trying to piece together coastlines based on second-hand reports and rough sketches. The Piri Reis map has fascinated and frustrated researchers for decades. Some see it as proof that advanced knowledge existed long before our official timeline allows. Others dismiss these claims, arguing that people want to see mystery where there is only confusion and error, but the map remains stubbornly resistant to simple answers. For example, the accuracy of the longitude and latitude is surprisingly good, even though the tools to calculate longitude precisely did not exist until centuries later. In the mid-20th century, the map attracted the attention of the United States Air Force, which commissioned a study to compare it with modern aerial photographs. The results were inconclusive, but added fuel to the idea that the coastline at the bottom of the map does indeed match the subglacial topography of Antarctica. Still, no one has ever found the original ancient charts Piri Reis claimed to have used, and so the debate continues. Beyond the question of Antarctica, the map reminds us how knowledge can flow across cultures and centuries, surviving wars, fires, and empires. The Ottomans were great gatherers of knowledge, and Piri Reis's work shows how sailors in the Middle Ages relied not just on their own discoveries, but on the wisdom of those who came before them, often without even knowing who they were. As you drift off tonight, imagine Piri Reis bent over his parchment by the glow of an oil lamp, piecing together coastlines from scraps of ancient charts and the salty tales of sailors who had glimpsed strange lands at the edge of the known world. Picture the map rolled up and forgotten in an archive for hundreds of years, waiting for someone to notice that its edges held a secret that might change the way we see our past. Whether the Piri Reis map is proof of a lost civilization, an ancient maritime tradition, or simply a beautiful mistake, it whispers to us that our world still holds secrets, just waiting to be uncovered by curious minds like yours. 6. The Antikythera mechanism. Deep beneath the turquoise waters off the coast of a tiny Greek island called Antikythera, sponge divers made a discovery in the early 20th century that would quietly become one of the greatest scientific puzzles of the ancient world. It was 1901 when a group of divers stumbled upon a Roman-era shipwreck. Scattered across the seafloor were marble statues, amphorae, jewelry, and something that at first glance looked like nothing more than a lump of corroded bronze and wood. No one could have imagined that inside this crusted fragment was a piece of technology so advanced it would not be matched again for well over 1,000 years. Today, we call it the Antikythera mechanism. It is often described as the world's first analog computer, an ancient device built around 200 BC that could predict the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with remarkable precision. Inside its fragile bronze casing are more than 30 intricate gears, so finely crafted that modern watchmakers have studied its construction with awe. The mechanism could calculate eclipses, track lunar phases, and even model the irregular orbit of the moon using sophisticated mathematics that historians once thought were centuries beyond the reach of the ancient Greeks. For decades after its discovery, the Antikythera mechanism sat quietly in storage, too corroded and fragile to fully understand. It was not until the 1950s that scientists began to take a closer look using X-rays and early imaging techniques. What they saw inside that barnacle-covered fragment was astonishing. Tiny teeth cut into bronze gears, each one meshing perfectly with the next, forming a complex system that turned dials on its face to display astronomical information. Some inscriptions etched into the device even provided instructions for its use, although parts of the text have been lost to time. One of the things that makes the Antikythera mechanism so extraordinary is what it tells us about ancient Greek science and craftsmanship. We often think of the ancient world as simple, a place of stone tools and primitive machines, but here was proof that more than 2,000 years ago, Greek engineers had mastered gear trains and mechanical design at a level not seen again until the invention of complex clockwork in medieval Europe. The precision of its components suggests that the people who made it understood how to measure, cut, and fit metal pieces together with tolerances so tight they still impress modern machinists. The device itself is small, roughly the size of a shoebox. Turning a hand crank on the side would have set the gears in motion, allowing the user to simulate the movements of the heavens. One dial predicted solar and lunar eclipses based on the Saros cycle, an 18-year period after which eclipses repeat. Another displayed the position of the sun and moon in the zodiac, while yet another modeled the irregular speed of the moon's orbit, accounting for its elliptical path. Some researchers believe it may have even tracked the movements of the 5 planets known to the Greeks at the time. Who made this extraordinary machine? No one knows for certain, but many believe it was built in the tradition of Greek astronomers like Hipparchus, or possibly even Archimedes himself. Its design is so sophisticated that some historians wonder if the Antikythera mechanism was not a one-of-a-kind invention, but part of a lost tradition of mechanical knowledge that simply vanished from history when empires fell and libraries burned. Over the years, fragments of the mechanism have been re-examined with ever more advanced technology. High-resolution 3D scans and modern X-ray imaging have revealed details invisible to the naked eye. Researchers have even built working replicas based on these scans, proving that the gears do what they were meant to do: turn the flow of time into something you can hold in your hands. Still, the Antikythera mechanism leaves us with tantalizing questions. Was it used by sailors navigating the treacherous Mediterranean? Did it belong to a wealthy scholar who carried it aboard the doomed ship as a prized possession? Or was it a teaching tool passed from one generation of philosophers to the next, showing how the stars and planets moved in the grand clockwork of the universe? In the end, the mechanism reminds us that history is not always a straight line of progress. Sometimes, knowledge rises and falls like the tides, brilliant discoveries lost and rediscovered by curious minds centuries later. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, imagine that ancient ship slipping beneath the waves, carrying its treasure chest of ideas down to the ocean floor where it would rest for 2,000 years. Picture the delicate gears, tiny and perfect, turning slowly in the dark, waiting for the day when divers would bring them back into the light, and the lost genius of the ancient world would whisper once more to those willing to listen. The Saqqara bird. The Saqqara bird. Among the dusty treasures of ancient Egypt, where golden masks and towering pyramids usually steal the spotlight, there sits a small wooden artifact that has puzzled historians, engineers, and dreamers alike. It is known as the Saqqara bird, a simple figure carved from sycamore wood and shaped like no ordinary statue. barely 6 inches long, it resembles a bird with outstretched wings, but its shape is more than decorative. Some believe it might hold a forgotten secret about how ancient people viewed the skies above them. The Saqqara bird was discovered in 1898 by a team excavating a tomb in the vast necropolis of Saqqara, just outside modern-day Cairo. Saqqara is one of the oldest and largest burial grounds in Egypt, where generations of pharaohs, nobles, and priests were laid to rest beneath elaborate mastabas and pyramids. Most artifacts unearthed here are statues, amulets, or funerary items meant to guide the dead into the afterlife. So when the small bird was found, it was cataloged and placed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo alongside other curious relics from the tomb. For decades, it sat unnoticed, a modest piece among more dazzling treasures. But in the mid-20th century, an aeronautical engineer named Khalil Messiah happened to see the Saqqara bird on display. What caught his eye was not its age or craftsmanship, but its uncanny resemblance to a modern aircraft. Unlike typical bird statues, the Saqqara bird has a tail fin that stands upright, more like the rudder of an airplane than a bird's feathers. Its wings are straight and gently curved, and the body is sleek, tapering toward the tail. To Messiah and others who studied it, these features suggested more than art. They hinted at an understanding of aerodynamics. Could it really have been more than a child's toy or symbolic offering? This question sparked endless debate. Some researchers dismissed the idea, arguing that ancient Egyptians often drew inspiration from nature. Birds, after all, were symbols of the soul, the sky, and freedom. Carving a bird-shaped figure would not have been unusual, but for those who look closer, the design is strikingly functional. Modern model makers have even built replicas of the Saqqara bird, adding a stabilizing weight to mimic how a real glider would fly. Remarkably, when thrown gently by hand, these replicas can glide through the air with surprising stability. So what does this mean? One theory is that the Saqqara bird was an early exploration of flight, not in the way we imagine aircraft today, but as a symbolic or practical experiment with gliding. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of the myth of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, who could soar between worlds. Birds were seen as messengers between the heavens and the earth, so it is not impossible that priests or inventors might have tried to mimic their flight, even in small ways. Others believe the bird could have been a ceremonial object, placed in the tomb to represent the soul's journey to the afterlife. Its aerodynamic shape might have been purely coincidental, the result of an artist trying to capture the elegance of a falcon or kite mid-flight. In ancient Egypt, falcons were associated with Horus, the sky god and protector of the pharaoh. To carve such a bird and leave it with the dead could have been a way to ensure safe passage into the next life. Of course, the idea that the Saqqara bird hints at ancient knowledge of aviation has inspired countless fringe theories too. Some say it is evidence that ancient Egyptians may have witnessed or even built flying machines. Others link it to stories of lost civilizations and forgotten technologies that existed long before modern history began. There is no evidence for such ideas, but the mystery remains enticing. Part of what makes the Saqqara bird so enduring is its ability to fire the imagination. When you look at its smooth wings and perfectly balanced tail, it is easy to picture a young craftsman in ancient Saqqara shaping this little figure by hand, perhaps testing how it moved through the air. Maybe he tossed it gently across a courtyard, watching it drift like a real bird on a warm breeze before tucking it into the tomb of its owner. Or maybe it never flew at all, meant instead to soar only in spirit. Today, the Saqqara bird sits in its glass case in the Egyptian Museum, surrounded by relics that speak of grander deeds and more powerful rulers. Yet this small figure invites us to wonder what secrets of the natural world ancient people might have understood. Did they dream of flight the way we do? Did they stand in the desert sun and imagine soaring high above the palm trees and riverbanks, following the hawks and kites that circled overhead? As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine that simple wooden bird resting in the stillness of a stone tomb for thousands of years, waiting patiently to be found. Picture it gliding weightlessly on a breeze, carrying the dreams of its makers toward the endless sky. The Saqqara bird reminds us that even the smallest artifact can lift our thoughts, letting our minds drift on ancient currents of wonder that still whisper through the halls of history. 8. The Nazca lines high above the sun-baked desert plains of southern Peru. A series of vast, sprawling drawings stretches across the land like messages to the heavens. Known as the Nazca lines, these gigantic geoglyphs have captured the imagination of explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers for generations. They are etched so precisely into the dry earth that you could stand right beside one and never fully grasp what you are seeing. Only when you rise into the sky do these lines transform into the forms of hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, fish, and geometric shapes so massive they can be seen from miles away. The Nazca lines were created by the ancient Nazca culture, which flourished in this harsh desert region between about 200 BCE and 600 CE. This stretch of desert is one of the driest places on Earth, which has helped preserve the lines for centuries. Rain is rare, winds are minimal, and the thin layer of dark pebbles that covers the pale earth beneath makes the drawings remarkably durable. By removing these dark stones and exposing the lighter soil underneath, the Nazca people turned the ground itself into a canvas that has lasted more than 1,000 years. There are hundreds of these geoglyphs, ranging from simple straight lines that cut across the desert floor for several miles to intricate figures of animals and plants. Some lines form trapezoids and spirals that spread like ancient runways across the plains. Others depict animals with a grace and clarity that is breathtaking, given their scale. The hummingbird, perhaps the most famous of the figures, stretches more than 300 feet from beak to tail. The monkey, with its coiled tail and outstretched limbs, twists across the desert in a shape so perfect it seems almost modern. But perhaps the greatest mystery of the Nazca lines is not how they were made, though that alone is impressive, but why they were made. Why would a civilization create massive drawings that can only be fully seen from high above, long before the age of flight or even hot air balloons? What purpose did these lines serve for the people who lived and died in this unforgiving landscape? Some archaeologists believe the lines had a spiritual or ceremonial significance. The Nazca people depended on the land for survival, yet they lived in one of the most barren regions imaginable. Many researchers think the lines may have been offerings to the gods who controlled water and fertility. Some of the straight lines align with the sunrise and sunset at certain times of the year, suggesting they could have been used to mark important points on a calendar, helping priests predict seasonal rains and plan agricultural cycles. Others think the geoglyphs were pathways for ritual processions. Imagine groups of people walking carefully along these giant lines, carrying offerings and chanting prayers under the relentless desert sun. Perhaps they believed that by moving along these sacred paths, they could connect with the spirits above, sending their hopes and pleas to the gods watching from the sky. Of course, the strangeness of the Nazca lines has also inspired countless alternative theories. Some writers have claimed the lines are runways for ancient alien visitors, pointing to the way the long straight lines cut across the desert like landing strips. others see the figures as star charts or maps of constellations, suggesting that the Nazca people used them to communicate with beings beyond our world. There is no evidence to support these ideas, but they remind us how powerful these shapes are, that they can spark stories that leap from the desert into the stars. In truth, the real story of the Nazca lines may be even more profound than the wildest theories. They show us the determination and creativity of a culture that made art on a scale so vast that only the gods could fully admire it. The effort required to plan and create these geoglyphs would have demanded enormous cooperation, knowledge of geometry, and perhaps even a belief that their actions on Earth echoed in the skies above. Standing at the edge of the Nazca Desert today, you might see nothing but flat plains and rocky soil stretching toward distant mountains. But if you could rise with the condors that soar on the warm desert winds, you would see the earth transformed into a tapestry of ancient lines and shapes, a message from a civilization that knew how to make its mark in a place where little else survives. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine the Nazca people moving across the desert, carefully placing each stone aside to reveal the pale soil below, creating patterns they would never see in full, but that they believed would endure long after they were gone. Picture those figures now, lying silent and waiting under the endless blue sky, reminders that sometimes the most powerful messages are not meant for human eyes at all, but for something greater, something watching from above. 9. Saksaywaman's precision stones. High in the Andes Mountains, overlooking the ancient city of Cusco, stand the remarkable stone walls of Saksaywaman, a fortress or ceremonial center whose massive stones have become one of the world's greatest architectural enigmas. Even today, centuries after the last Inca emperor walked these grounds, visitors come from around the world to stand in silent awe before these gigantic stone blocks and run their fingers along the seams where each rock meets its neighbor with uncanny precision. You cannot slide even the edge of a sheet of paper between them. These walls have withstood earthquakes, rain, wind, and centuries of human curiosity, yet the secret of how they were built remains just out of reach. Saksaywaman was constructed by the Inca civilization, who flourished in the Andes long before the arrival of Spanish conquistadors. The site itself is built on a hill overlooking Cusco, the former capital of the Inca Empire. Its strategic location suggests it was both a fortress and a ceremonial complex, a place that combined military might with spiritual significance. But what makes Saksaywaman truly astonishing is the way its massive stones were quarried, moved, shaped, and fitted together in ways that modern engineers still struggle to explain. Some stones at Saksaywaman weigh more than 100 tons, with the largest estimated to be close to 200 tons. Imagine trying to move a rock that size up a steep mountain slope without modern cranes, trucks, or heavy machinery. The quarries from which these stones were cut lie miles away, adding another layer of difficulty to the puzzle. The Inca had no wheels, no draft animals capable of pulling such heavy loads, and yet they somehow managed to transport these stones across rugged terrain and place them with incredible care. Perhaps the most mind-boggling aspect is the shape of the stones themselves. They are not uniform bricks or blocks, but irregular polygons, each one unique. Some have 12 or more angles, with edges that twist and turn to interlock perfectly with the surrounding stones. When you see these walls up close, it looks like an immense jigsaw puzzle made of stone, each piece custom fitted to its neighbors with such precision that they appear to have grown together over time. The fit is so tight that the walls have survived centuries of devastating earthquakes, that toppled buildings built with mortar and bricks. The stones at Saksaywaman simply absorb the vibrations and settle back into place, holding each other steady, like old friends leaning on one another in a storm. How did the Inca accomplish this feat? One theory is that they used simple stone hammers and chisels to slowly pound and chip each massive block into shape. They may have used ropes, levers, and ramps to maneuver the stones into position. Some researchers believe that workers would place the stones next to one another and mark the high points with pigment before chiseling them down, repeating this laborious process again and again until each stone nestled perfectly into place. But others believe there must have been more to it. The sheer scale and precision of the work has led some to suggest that the Inca possessed techniques now lost to time, perhaps a deep knowledge of stone softening or thermal expansion that allowed them to shape rocks as if they were clay. There is no direct evidence for such methods, but the questions persist because what remains defies easy explanation. The design of Saksaywaman was not just about strength. The walls also carry deep symbolic meaning. Some believe they represent the teeth of a great puma, an animal sacred to the Inca and symbolic of power and the earthly world. From the air, the zigzagging shape of the walls appears like a series of giant fangs biting into the hillside. Within these walls, ceremonies were held to honor the sun, the earth, and the spirits that the Inca believed watched over their empire. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they marveled at the walls of Saksaywaman, but saw them as a ready source of building materials for their own churches and houses in Cusco below. Much of the smaller stone was carried off, but the largest blocks were simply too massive to move. They remain where they have always been, guardians of secrets that even time and conquest could not erase. Today, visitors walk along the walls and try to slide a coin or a blade of grass into the narrow seams. They stand in the shadows of stones so large they dwarf even the tallest person. Some listen to the stories told by local guides who pass down legends of giants who once roamed these hills and built the fortress in a single night. Others simply stand in silence, tracing the edges of the stones with their fingertips, feeling the cold surface that has felt the warmth of the sun for hundreds of years. As you drift off tonight, picture those ancient stones bathed in golden afternoon light, standing watch over Cusco as they always have. Imagine the hands that shaped them, the chants that rose between them during rituals long forgotten, and the quiet strength they still carry. Saksaywaman reminds us that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not hidden, but standing right before us, carved into stone, that whispers of a time when people built wonders that still make us wonder in return. 10. The Uffington White Horse. In the rolling hills of Oxfordshire, England, there is a place where the earth holds the outline of a horse, so vast that you can only truly grasp its shape from far above. Known as the Uffington White Horse, this ancient hill figure has watched over the English countryside for thousands of years, its gleaming white silhouette etched into the green hillside like a living memory. It is a symbol of mystery and endurance, one that has inspired legends, poems, and quiet wonder for generations. Yet for all its beauty, the white horse keeps its secrets well guarded. No one knows exactly who carved it, what it truly represents, or why it has remained so strikingly crisp and clear despite the long march of time. The Uffington White Horse is not a statue or a standing stone, but a geoglyph, a figure created by cutting deep trenches into the grassy slope to expose the bright white chalk beneath. Measuring about 360 feet from tail to nose, its long, slender body and gracefully curving neck seem to belong more to a creature from a dream than a farm animal. Its lines flow in a way that feels alive, almost like it might gallop away across the hills if you turned your back for just a moment. Archaeologists have dated the Uffington white horse to at least 3,000 years ago, placing its creation in the late Bronze Age, around 1000 BCE. This makes it one of the oldest hill figures in Britain, older than the Celtic tribes who later settled these lands, and far older than the medieval knights and farmers who kept its outline alive. Over the centuries, people living near the horse have carefully maintained its shape by a process known as scouring, a ritual cleaning and rechalking of its trenches to ensure that the figure does not fade into the hillside and disappear. But why did people carve such a figure into the earth in the first place? This is where the mystery deepens. Some believe the horse was created as a tribal symbol, a mark of territory or identity for the people who lived in the surrounding valleys. Horses held great significance for ancient cultures in Britain, representing strength, freedom, and connection to the spirit world. The nearby Ridgeway, one of Britain's oldest pathways, runs close to the horse and may have served as a ceremonial route where the figure stood as a guardian or blessing for travelers. Others suggest the white horse may have been tied to religious practices. It is carved near Uffington Castle, an Iron Age hill fort that likely served as a place of gathering and ritual. Some scholars believe that the figure might have been a representation of a horse goddess, such as Epona, who was worshipped by Celtic peoples as a protector of horses and riders. To carve her sacred animal into the earth itself would have been a powerful offering, a prayer made permanent in chalk and soil. Of course, as with many ancient sites, stories have grown up around the white horse that blur the line between history and myth. One legend says that it represents the dragon slain by St. George, the patron saint of England, whose spirit is said to rest in the nearby Dragon Hill. Another tale tells of King Alfred the Great, who supposedly carved the horse to commemorate a great victory against Viking invaders. While these stories are beautiful, they do not hold up to the evidence that places the horse's origin centuries before these figures ever walked the land. Equally puzzling is how the horse has remained so well preserved through millennia of rain, frost, and human activity. Part of the answer lies in the dedication of local people who have passed down the tradition of scouring the horse from one generation to the next. Community gatherings would be held every few years where families would gather on the hillside, removing encroaching grasses and renewing the chalk to keep the figure bright and visible for miles around. This simple act of care has kept the horse from fading into the green slopes that cradle it. Standing before the Uffington white horse today, you feel a sense of timelessness that is hard to describe. The wind sweeps across the hills, rustling the grasses that surround the chalk trenches, while the horse looks down at the fields and villages below, just as it has for thousands of years. It is easy to imagine the people who first carved it, kneeling on the hillside with flint tools, shaping the earth beneath their hands to create an image they knew they might never see in full, yet one they trusted would endure. As you drift to sleep tonight, picture that ancient figure glowing under the moonlight, its lines as bright and clean as the day they were first carved. Imagine the hands that have tended it across the centuries, the children who have played near its curves, the elders who have told stories of its meaning. The Uffington white horse reminds us that even when time moves on, some symbols remain, standing watch over the landscape and the people who still pause to wonder what secrets they might hold. 11. The Hypogeum's Oracle Room. Beneath the quiet streets of Malta lies a labyrinth older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, a place carved by ancient hands into the soft limestone of the island. This is the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, an underground temple and burial complex whose very walls whisper secrets from a time long before history was written down. And within this subterranean wonder sits perhaps its most fascinating chamber, a small vaulted space known simply as the Oracle Room. To step inside, it is to feel as though the stone itself is alive, vibrating with a hum that many believe can reach into the human mind and stir something deep and mysterious within us. The Hypogeum is not just one cave, but an intricate network of tunnels, chambers, and sacred spaces stacked on 3 levels, reaching as deep as 35 feet underground. It dates back as far as 4000 BCE, making it one of the oldest known underground temples in the world. Generations of people used it as a place to lay their dead to rest, to perform rituals, and perhaps to commune with something greater than themselves. Its walls are painted with red ochre spirals, patterns that seem to swirl like the thoughts of the people who once chanted within these stone corridors. But the Oracle Room is different. It is a small chamber, unremarkable at first glance, with smooth stone walls that gently curve around you like a protective cocoon. There are no grand carvings or treasures inside. Yet this quiet chamber holds a secret that modern acoustics has only begun to understand. When a human voice speaks or sings within the Oracle Room, the stone amplifies the sound and bounces it back at a frequency of about 110 hertz. To the casual ear, it is a pleasant, deep resonance, but to the brain, it is something more, a frequency that researchers have found can subtly alter the way we feel and think. Studies suggest that sounds at 110 hertz can stimulate certain regions of the brain that handle emotional processing and creativity. People who have stood in the Oracle Room and spoken in a low chant describe feeling a sense of calm, focus, and sometimes even a mild trance, as if the stone walls are joining in the chant, wrapping their voices in echoes that blur the line between sound and thought. Some say that the resonant vibrations can be felt in the bones and chest, a physical hum that connects the living body with the ancient stone. This has led to a question that keeps archaeologists, acousticians, and historians awake at night. Did the builders of the Hypogeum know exactly what they were doing when they carved the Oracle Room? Was this acoustic wonder the result of careful design, or simply a happy accident discovered by chance? If it was intentional, it would mean that people more than 5,000 years ago understood something about how sound interacts with the mind and body, knowledge that would have placed them far ahead of their time. One theory is that the Oracle Room was used by priests or shamans who delivered prophecies, their voices amplified by the chamber's natural acoustics to sound otherworldly. Imagine kneeling in the darkness, a single flickering flame casting shadows across the painted walls as a priest's voice reverberates through the stone, echoing like a chorus of spirits answering from the depths. In such a setting, even the simplest words could take on a power that transcends ordinary speech. Yet there is no written record left by the people who built the Hypogeum. We do not know what rituals they performed, what prayers they spoke, or what they believed waited for them beyond this life. All we have are the bones they left behind, the remains of thousands who were buried within its chambers, and the chambers themselves, each stone a testament to their devotion and mystery. The Oracle Room is not the only space within the Hypogeum that hints at the importance of sound. Other chambers also have remarkable acoustic properties, but none as clear and resonant as this small vault. Some researchers believe the entire complex may have been designed as an acoustic environment, with chants and drums echoing through the tunnels, guiding worshippers into altered states of mind for ceremonies or burial rites. Today, the Hypogeum is carefully protected. Only a handful of visitors are allowed inside each day to preserve its fragile walls and the unique microclimate that has helped keep it intact for millennia. Those lucky enough to stand within the oracle room speak of a hush that settles over you the moment you enter. It is a place where time feels suspended, where you can almost hear the faint echoes of chants that have not been sung for thousands of years. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine yourself in that stone chamber, your breath joining the silence, your heartbeat resonating gently with the hum of the ancient walls. The oracle room reminds us that sound is more than noise. It can be a bridge to other states of mind, a doorway into the unknown, and a quiet whisper from the past that still lingers beneath the earth, waiting for you to listen. 12. The unfinished obelisk. In the sun-scorched quarries of Aswan, Egypt, there lies a silent monument to both ambition and mystery. It is not a temple or a pyramid, but a single massive piece of stone, still joined to the earth, where ancient hands first began to shape it, more than 3,000 years ago. Known as the unfinished obelisk, this enormous granite monolith remains where it was abandoned, half carved from the bedrock. If it had ever been completed and raised, it would have been the largest obelisk ever erected in Egypt, a testament to the skill, determination, and vision of the ancient stoneworkers who dreamed it into being. Instead, it remains unfinished, offering us a rare glimpse into the secrets of how the ancient Egyptians mastered some of the hardest stone on earth. The unfinished obelisk lies in the northern region of the granite quarries in Aswan, the very place where so many of Egypt's most famous monuments began their journey. Obelisks were more than just towering pillars of stone. To the ancient Egyptians, they were sacred markers, believed to be rays of frozen sunlight that connected the heavens to the earth. They were dedicated to the sun god Ra, and each one was carefully positioned at temple entrances to catch the first light of dawn. Carved from a single piece of granite, these slender spires required incredible planning and labor. The scale of the unfinished obelisk is almost beyond belief. It measures about 120 feet in length and would have weighed around 1,200 tons. That is more than twice the weight of any obelisk ever successfully erected. Walking alongside it today, you can see the clear outlines where ancient workers painstakingly chiseled away the surrounding granite with dolerite pounding stones, and the tool marks are still there, frozen in time, giving archaeologists an open window into the techniques used to free such a colossal monument from solid bedrock. But then, something went wrong. As the workers carved deeper, cracks appeared in the granite. These natural fissures spread through the stone until the obelisk was fatally flawed. For the ancient builders, there could be no repairing it. The crack meant the obelisk could never stand safely, so the project was abandoned. The workers moved on, leaving behind a massive stone that had absorbed months, perhaps years of labor. Why would the Egyptians risk so much effort on a single piece of stone? The answer lies in what obelisks symbolized. To the pharaohs, an obelisk was not just a monument, but a statement of divine power and connection to the gods. Erecting one demonstrated the ruler's control over resources, labor, and the natural world. In a landscape dotted with massive temples and statues, each new obelisk had to be taller, more impressive, and more perfectly placed than the last. It was a competition between generations of rulers to prove their devotion and their unmatched capability to shape the world around them. Standing beside the unfinished obelisk, you can almost hear the echoes of hammer blows and voices carried away on the desert wind. Imagine the teams of workers toiling in the heat, pounding the granite with stone balls to slowly carve out trenches around the obelisk's outline. They would have lit small fires along cracks to heat the rock and then poured cold water to cause slight fractures, making the stone easier to break free. It was a delicate balance of brute force and careful calculation. Once freed, the obelisk would have been transported down the Nile River on enormous wooden barges, then raised with ropes, ramps, and sheer human determination, a feat that still amazes engineers today. One miscalculation could mean disaster, yet countless obelisks still stand in Egypt and in cities around the world, where they were later carried by conquerors and collectors. The unfinished obelisk is unique because it was never moved, never polished, and never inscribed with hieroglyphs. It remains in its raw, half-made state, a testament to the human effort that almost brought it into being. It also reminds us that even the greatest builders faced limits set by the very stone they sought to command. For modern visitors, the unfinished obelisk is a monument not just to the pharaohs, but to the countless anonymous workers whose labor shaped the wonders of ancient Egypt. It allows us to trace their chisel marks with our own fingers, to see the scars in the granite that halted their dream, and to stand where they once stood, looking down into the quarry at what might have been. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine that colossal stone resting under the same desert sun that once baked the backs of workers as they carved their legacy into the earth. Picture the dust rising with each strike, the sound of stone on stone ringing out over the Nile's timeless flow. The unfinished obelisk lies there still, a reminder that even the grandest ambitions can remain incomplete, and that sometimes the work left undone tells its own powerful story about the people who dared to shape the world from solid rock. 13. The Longyou Caves. Caves Adon Long, you caves Adonats, and Wathanawanid, you caves Adonats Act. Hidden beneath the quiet hills of Zhejiang province in eastern China lies a mystery carved into stone, so vast and precise that even today it leaves historians, engineers, and ordinary visitors speechless. These are the Longyou Caves, a complex of massive underground chambers cut entirely by human hands from solid sandstone. What makes these caves so baffling is not just their size, but the fact that no historical record mentions their construction. No ancient text, no oral story, no inscription has ever explained who carved them, when they were made, or what purpose they were meant to serve. It is as if they simply appeared, fully formed and perfectly finished, waiting silently beneath the earth until someone stumbled upon their hidden doors. The story of their discovery is almost as fascinating as the caves themselves. In 1992, a local villager named Wu Anai decided to drain a small pond near his village of Xi'an Beikun. Such ponds were common in the area and had always been assumed to be natural, fed by underground springs. But when the water finally receded, what emerged was not a muddy pit, but the entrance to an immense man-made cavern. Intrigued, other villagers began draining nearby ponds, and one by one, they found more of these astonishing chambers beneath the surface. Today, at least 24 caves have been found, each carved with astonishing uniformity and precision. The largest of these reaches almost 100 feet high, with ceilings that arch gracefully like the naves of ancient cathedrals. Some chambers cover areas the size of a football field. The walls are smooth, every surface marked with parallel chisel lines that create a textured pattern, almost as if the ancient workers wanted to leave behind a signature in every cut. The sheer scale of the excavation is mind-boggling. It is estimated that nearly 1 million cubic meters of stone would have had to be removed to create the caves, a task that would have required tens of thousands of workers laboring for years, if not decades. But how did they do it? And more importantly, why? There are no signs of chisel marks in progress, no discarded tools, No piles of leftover stone debris that one would expect from a quarrying site. Everything was carried away, leaving behind only the perfectly finished chambers. Equally strange is the fact that none of the caves are connected to each other. Each stands alone, its own separate world of stone, with pillars left in place to support the ceilings, like silent guardians. Scholars have offered many theories about the purpose of the Longyou caves. Some suggest they were ancient underground storage facilities, perhaps for grain or precious goods that needed to be protected from the humid climate above. Others believe they may have served as secret hideaways during times of war, or even as tombs for powerful families, although no human remains have ever been found inside. There are also those who think the caves had a ceremonial or religious function, places where rituals were performed far from the eyes of the outside world. Yet no definitive evidence supports any of these ideas. Equally puzzling is the craftsmanship on display. The cave's structural integrity is remarkable. After thousands of years, the ceilings and pillars show no signs of collapse, and the walls remain smooth and true. Some sections even include staircases, bridges, and decorative carvings that hint at an aesthetic purpose beyond mere practicality. The uniform chisel marks covering every surface are not just functional, they are beautiful in their own way, giving the stone an almost woven texture when light falls across it. Adding to the enigma is the complete absence of any mention of the caves in local historical records. Chinese history is among the most meticulously documented in the ancient world, with chronicles that stretch back millennia. Yet the Longyou caves appear nowhere, not even as a passing reference. How could a project of such scale, requiring so much labor and organization, simply vanish from memory? The local villagers who found the caves still care for them, opening some to visitors who walk down stone steps into the cool darkness. Standing inside one of the chambers, you feel a sense of timeless quiet, as if the caves are holding their breath, waiting for someone to solve their riddle. The faint echo of footsteps bounces off the high ceilings, a reminder of the countless unknown workers whose chisels must have struck these walls day after day, year after year. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine these great underground halls lying hidden beneath the rolling hills, their entrances disguised for centuries by shallow ponds and drifting reeds. Picture the lanterns of ancient workers flickering in the darkness, the steady sound of stone meeting chisel, the soft shuffle of sand carried away bucket by bucket. The Longyou caves are a reminder that sometimes the earth itself keeps its secrets well hidden, offering us only glimpses into the ambition and artistry of people whose stories were lost to time, but whose work remains, carved in stone beneath our feet, waiting for the day when their true purpose might finally be understood. 14. The Sphinx water erosion. When you picture the sands of ancient Egypt, the great Sphinx of Giza likely rises up in your mind's eye like a dream, that weathered, majestic face staring out toward the horizon, the body of a reclining lion stretching behind it, and the pyramids standing nearby like silent sentinels of a lost age. The Sphinx is more than just stone. It is a symbol of ancient genius, endurance, and a puzzle that has fascinated people for centuries. Carved from the limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau, the Sphinx is enormous, about 240 feet long and 66 feet high. Most historians agree that it was built during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, around 2500 BCE. This would make the Sphinx more than 4,500 years old, already ancient when the first Greek philosophers gazed upon it. But what if it is even older than that? What if the Sphinx's true age reaches so far back that it shakes the foundations of our understanding of ancient civilization? This is the bold question raised by the theory known as the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis. It began in the 1970s and 1980s when a few geologists and independent researchers started to look closely at the weathering on the Sphinx's body and its surrounding enclosure. What they saw did not look like damage caused by the desert winds or the blowing sands that sculpt so many other ancient monuments. Instead, they saw deep, rounded fissures and undulating profiles in the limestone, signs, they argued, of erosion caused primarily by water. One of the most well-known supporters of this idea is Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist who examined the Sphinx in the 1990s. He argued that the type of weathering visible on the Sphinx's body could only have been caused by prolonged heavy rainfall. But there is a problem. The Giza Plateau has been bone dry and arid for thousands of years. The last time this region experienced sustained, significant rainfall was at the end of the last ice age, somewhere between 7,000 and 12,000 years ago. If the Sphinx was exposed to the elements during that time, then its construction could date back not to the Old Kingdom of Egypt, but to a much earlier and largely unknown prehistoric period. This idea has sparked intense debate. Mainstream Egyptologists firmly maintain that the Sphinx was built during Khafre's reign, pointing to the architectural style, the alignment with the nearby pyramid, and the discovery of statues of Khafre within the temple complex. They argue that wind erosion, not water, can also create rounded patterns under certain conditions. They also point out that other structures from the same period show similar weathering. Yet the debate does not fade away. Supporters of the water erosion hypothesis suggest that the head of the Sphinx appears disproportionately small compared to its massive body, implying that the head was recarved at some point in history, possibly reshaped into the face of a pharaoh long after the body had already stood for millennia. This theory adds another layer of intrigue. Who carved the original figure, and what did it represent? Some think it may have once been a lion, or another symbolic creature linked to the stars and the constellations that ancient people watched so closely. If the Sphinx truly predates the civilization we know as ancient Egypt, it would mean that an advanced society capable of monumental stonework existed long before the pharaohs, perhaps even before the invention of agriculture as we understand it. It hints at the possibility of a lost chapter in humanity's story, a people whose knowledge and abilities were swept away by time, leaving only this silent guardian behind. Whether you believe the traditional timeline or the radical alternative, standing in the shadow of the Sphinx is an experience that makes you feel small and connected to something timeless. The stone is scarred and battered from centuries of wind, sand, and human intervention. Restoration efforts have patched cracks and replaced blocks, yet the original core endures, a testament to the hands that carved it and the countless eyes that have gazed upon it. As you drift off tonight, imagine the Sphinx under a sky heavy with rain, thousands of years before the Sahara turned to desert. Picture torrents of water flowing across the limestone, carving deep grooves into its flanks as it stood watch over the Nile Valley. Perhaps already a relic from an even older past. Maybe, just maybe, the truth of the Sphinx's age is not written on a scroll or hidden in a tomb, but etched into its stone body by the soft yet relentless touch of rain, a reminder that sometimes the secrets of history are hidden not in what we build, but in how the earth itself shapes and preserves our greatest creations. 15. The trilithons of Baalbek. In the fertile Bekaa Valley of modern-day Lebanon stands an ancient site that continues to inspire wonder, debate, and countless questions about what our ancestors were truly capable of. This place is Baalbek, Once known to the Romans as Heliopolis, the city of the sun, within its sprawling temple complex lie some of the largest stone blocks ever quarried and moved by human hands. These colossal stones, known as the trilithons, are so massive that even today, with all our modern cranes and machinery, moving them would be a monumental feat. Yet there they are, stacked precisely atop one another, a testament to a mastery of engineering that seems almost impossible for its time. The grandest of Baalbek's ruins is the Temple of Jupiter, a vast sanctuary built to honor the king of the Roman gods. Its scale is breathtaking, even after centuries of earthquakes, invasions, and the slow march of time. Its remaining columns still soar nearly 60 feet into the sky. But it is the foundations that hold the greatest mystery. Beneath the temple platform lie 3 stones so enormous that they almost defy belief. Each trilithon block is estimated to weigh around 800 to 1,000 tons. To put that into perspective, that is the weight of about 2 fully loaded Boeing 747 airplanes, each carved from solid limestone and positioned with such precision that you cannot fit a piece of paper between them. Standing before these stones, you cannot help but wonder how ancient builders could have quarried, transported, and lifted them into place without cranes, trucks, or modern power tools. The nearest quarry lies about a half-mile away from the temple site. Archaeologists believe the stones were quarried there and then somehow moved across rough ground and lifted into place atop a foundation of smaller, yet still massive blocks. The sheer logistics of such an operation stagger the imagination. Some researchers suggest that the Romans, renowned for their engineering prowess, used a combination of ramps, rollers, and manpower to maneuver these stones. They might have built massive earthen ramps leading from the quarry to the site, dragging the stones on sledges lubricated with oil or water to reduce friction. Teams of hundreds or even thousands of laborers could have coordinated their efforts with ropes, levers, and wooden cranes to inch the stones forward and into position. Yet no definitive evidence of such ramps or the detailed mechanics of this process has ever been found. What makes Baalbek even more intriguing is that some scholars argue the trilithons were not placed there by the Romans at all, but were inherited from a much older civilization. The idea is that when the Romans came to Heliopolis and decided to build their great temple, they built upon an already ancient foundation, whose true builders had long since vanished. According to this view, the precision and size of the trilithons suggest knowledge and techniques that may have been lost by the time the Romans arrived. This theory finds fuel in the fact that nearby in the quarry still lies the stone of the pregnant woman, an even larger monolith estimated to weigh over 1,000 tons. It remains partially separated from the bedrock, abandoned as if its builders suddenly stopped work and never returned. Legends about Baalbek's origins stretch far beyond the realm of archaeology. Some stories say that the site was once the domain of giants, or that it was built by the biblical King Solomon using magical knowledge and the help of jinn. Ancient Arab historians wrote that Baalbek was one of the cities built by Nimrod after the Great Flood, its massive stones laid to stand for eternity. While these tales dwell firmly in the realm of myth, they speak to the awe that Baalbek inspires in all who stand before its stones. Today, visitors who make the journey to Baalbek stand on the same platform that once supported one of the grandest temples of the Roman world. They run their hands along the weathered limestone blocks and peer into the quarry where more unfinished giants still lie waiting. The stones bear the marks of ancient tools and the passage of centuries, yet they seem timeless, unmoved by the wind and rain that have battered them for millennia. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine the builders of Baalbek under a bright Mediterranean sun, their voices echoing through the valley as they worked stone against stone. Picture the massive trilithons inching forward on wooden sledges, guided by hands now long turned to dust, each block laid with such care that they remain locked together after thousands of years. The trilithons of Baalbek stand as a reminder that our ancestors were capable of feats we still struggle to explain, and that sometimes the greatest wonders are not just what we build, but the mysteries we leave behind, carved in stone for future dreamers to puzzle over beneath the endless sky. 16. The stone spheres of Costa Rica. Deep within the lush rainforests and tangled river valleys of southern Costa Rica lie some of the strangest and most captivating artifacts ever uncovered in the Americas. These are the defy spheres, or simply the stone spheres of Costa Rica. They sit scattered across fields, buried beneath layers of jungle soil, and displayed in museums, their smooth round shapes standing out against the wild landscape that has long tried to reclaim them. Some are small enough to cradle in your arms, while others are as large as a truck and weigh up to 16 tons. Each one is a silent question carved in stone, an echo from a culture that left no written record of who they were or why they made these spheres in the first place. The stone spheres were first brought to wider attention in the 1930s, when workers clearing land for banana plantations stumbled upon dozens of these strange boulders half buried in the soil. At first, they must have seemed like natural oddities, but as more and more spheres were uncovered, it quickly became clear that these perfectly shaped stones were no accident of nature. Each sphere was intentionally crafted from hard igneous rock like granodorite, basalt, or limestone, and they were carved with such precision that many remain almost perfectly round, even after centuries exposed to the elements. Archaeologists now believe that these spheres were created by the pre-Columbian defy culture, who flourished in this region between about 600 and 1500 CE. Despite the hundreds of spheres that have been found, ranging in size from just a few inches to over 8 feet in diameter, not a single piece of writing, drawing, or oral tradition has survived to tell us exactly what they meant to the people who made them. This absence of direct evidence leaves us with only our curiosity and the spheres themselves as clues. The craftsmanship behind these spheres is astonishing when you consider the tools available at the time. The defy people likely used handheld hammerstones and a painstaking process of pecking, grinding, and polishing to shape each rock into a near-perfect sphere. It is thought that they used sand as an abrasive, slowly smoothing the stone's surface until it reached the desired roundness. This was no small task, for to shape a single massive boulder into a sphere weighing many tons would have taken enormous effort, time, and community cooperation. Equally puzzling is how the spheres were moved. Many were found far from the sources of their stone material, suggesting that they were transported over rivers and through dense jungle. Theories about their movement range from rolling the stones on logs to floating them on rafts, but no single method has ever been proven. What were they for? This is the question that fascinates anyone who stands before one of these ancient stone globes. Some researchers believe the spheres served as status symbols, markers of power and prestige for leaders or prominent families. In some excavation sites, the spheres were found lined up in straight rows or arranged in geometric patterns near the foundations of what may have been important dwellings or gathering places. This hints that the spheres might have played a ceremonial role, perhaps marking sacred spaces or the passage of celestial bodies across the sky. Other ideas lean into more symbolic possibilities. The spheres might have represented the sun, the moon, or other celestial objects, embodying the Dequise people's understanding of the cosmos. Or perhaps they were created as offerings to deities, physical prayers meant to last forever in the landscape. Local legends have added their own layer of mystery over the centuries. Some stories speak of treasure hidden inside the stones, inspiring treasure hunters to dynamite several spheres open, only to find solid rock within. Others say the stones were weapons of the gods, flung down from the heavens during mighty battles long ago. These stories, of course, cannot be proven, but they speak to the sense of wonder the spheres inspire. Today, many of the stone spheres of Costa Rica have been moved from their original locations, taken to museums, town squares, and private gardens. A number of them were damaged during the early days of the banana plantations, when workers pushed them aside or broke them apart, unaware of their cultural value. Thankfully, in recent decades, efforts have been made to protect these remarkable artifacts. Several sites containing the spheres are now UNESCO World Heritage Sites, recognized as treasures of human heritage. As you drift off to sleep tonight, picture the Costa Rican jungle at dawn, the mist rising through the trees, birds calling overhead, and deep within the forest, a row of ancient stone spheres resting silently where they were placed so long ago. Imagine the hands that shaped them, the eyes that once looked on them with reverence, and the whispers that might still drift through the trees, carrying secrets from a time when people carved the world they knew into the shape of a perfect stone circle, a shape that endures, inviting us to wonder what those long-lost artisans dreamed as they brought such impossible beauty into being. Thevatum, the Puma Punku stones. High on the windswept Andean plateau of Bolivia, where the air is thin and the mountains stand like ancient sentinels, lies a place that continues to confound historians, engineers, and curious wanderers alike. This place is Puma Punku, part of the vast Tiwanaku archaeological complex. While Tiwanaku itself is impressive, once the center of a powerful pre-Incan civilization, it is Puma Punku that draws the eye of those who seek the puzzles of the ancient world. Scattered across its ruins are massive stone blocks carved and shaped with such astonishing precision that even today we cannot say for certain how they were made. Puma Punku, which means door of the puma in the native Aymara language, is believed to have been built around 500 to 600 CE by the Tiwanaku culture. This civilization thrived for centuries in the high-altitude region near Lake Titicaca, long before the rise of the Inca Empire. What makes Puma Punku so extraordinary is not just its age or size, but the intricate way its stones were worked. Here you find enormous blocks of andesite and red sandstone, some weighing over 130 tons, lying as if they were once pieces of a grand puzzle that was never fully finished, or perhaps deliberately dismantled by time and natural forces. When you stand among these stones, you cannot help but notice the sharp angles and perfect cuts. Some stones feature precisely drilled holes aligned so perfectly that they could pass for modern machine work. Others are shaped into interlocking forms, like giant three-dimensional jigsaw pieces, designed to fit together without the use of mortar. One of the most iconic features of Puma Punku is the series of 8-shaped blocks, each identical in dimensions, hinting at a standardized design that suggests a high degree of planning and architectural knowledge. The question that has puzzled so many is, how did the Tiwanaku people achieve this level of craftsmanship? These stones are not soft limestone or easily carved tough. Andesite, in particular, is incredibly hard, comparable in toughness to granite. Modern experiments using the tools that would have been available at the time, simple hammerstones, of even harder minerals show that shaping even a small piece of andesite with such precision would have required countless hours, immense patience, and a deep understanding of the material. Some researchers believe that the Tiwanaku developed advanced stoneworking techniques, now lost to us. They may have used copper tools with abrasives like sand and water to slowly grind down the stone's surfaces. Others speculate that they understood methods for softening stone, using plant extracts or heat treatments to make the rock more workable, though no evidence for such techniques has ever been proven. The way the stones were moved and placed is equally remarkable. Puma Punku's location sits more than 12,000 feet above sea level. The quarry for the red sandstone blocks lies about 10 kilometers away, across challenging terrain. The nearest source for the andesite is even farther. How these massive blocks were transported, some weighing more than a locomotive, remains a subject of debate. The precision of the construction extends to the overall design of the site. The blocks were laid out in such a way that they locked together, forming walls and terraces that could withstand earthquakes common in the region. This interlocking technique is similar to that seen in other Andean structures, like those in Cusco or Machu Picchu, but at Puma Punku, the cuts appear even more refined, almost industrial in their quality. It is little wonder that Puma Punku has inspired countless alternative theories over the years. Some claim that the site is proof of ancient advanced technology, perhaps even influenced by lost civilizations or visitors from beyond the stars. These ideas, while lacking solid evidence, speak to the sense of awe these stones inspire. When you run your fingers along the edges of a perfectly carved groove, it is easy to see why the imagination leaps beyond the simple hammer and chisel. Yet perhaps the truth is just as fascinating, without needing otherworldly explanations. The people of Tiwanaku were master builders, engineers, and artists who harnessed their environment in ways that pushed the limits of what was possible. They likely had generations of knowledge passed down, skills learned by observing the land and experimenting with methods lost to time. Today, Puma Punku lies partly in ruins, its stones toppled by earthquakes or centuries of erosion. Some blocks lie cracked where they fell, scattered like the pieces of an ancient blueprint that no one has ever fully understood. Yet even in their fallen state, the stones of Puma Punku whisper stories of a people whose ingenuity carved impossible shapes high above the clouds. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine standing on that Andean plateau, the wind brushing against your face, the cold air carrying the scent of ancient earth. Picture the Tiwanaku craftsmen shaping stone beneath a bright sun, each tap of their tools guided by knowledge we may never fully rediscover. The Puma Punku stones remain there still, waiting in their quiet grandeur to remind us that the past is filled with wonders that defy easy answers, and that some mysteries, like the precision of these ancient cuts, are what keep our dreams alive. 18. The Baghdad Battery. Among the many ancient puzzles that blur the line between what we think our ancestors knew and what they may have discovered, lies a curious little object often called the Baghdad Battery. Its name alone sounds like something that should not exist, a battery from the ancient world, long before the age of electricity and wires, light bulbs, or chemical power cells. Yet for decades, this unassuming clay jar has sparked debates, experiments, and a fair share of wild speculation. The story of the Baghdad Battery begins in the 1930s, when workers excavating near Baghdad, Iraq, uncovered a collection of small clay jars in the ruins of an ancient Parthian or Sassanid settlement dating to around 200 BCE to 250 CE. These jars were about 5 to 6 inches tall, sealed with a bitumen stopper through which an iron rod protruded. Inside the jar was a copper cylinder, just large enough for the iron rod to fit down its center without touching the sides. Many archaeologists would have dismissed this as an odd container or ritual object, but when Wilhelm König, the German archaeologist and museum director overseeing the find, examined the jars, he saw something more: the components of an electrochemical cell. König proposed a radical idea. These ancient people had stumbled upon the principle of the battery. When filled with an acidic liquid, such as vinegar or grape juice, the copper and iron would create a mild electric current, just as a modern battery does. It was an extraordinary claim. If true, it meant people in the ancient world had discovered how to generate electricity 2,000 years before scientists like Alessandro Volta formally described the process. What would they have done with such a battery? Here the mystery deepens. There is no record or surviving text that explains how these jars were used or what they powered. This lack of evidence has opened the door to a wealth of theories, some reasonable, others reaching into the fantastic. One of the more plausible ideas is that these batteries were used for electroplating. By running a small electric current through a metal object submerged in electrolyte solution, a thin layer of gold or silver can be deposited onto its surface. This technique would have allowed ancient craftsmen to coat cheaper metals with a veneer of precious metal, creating beautiful jewelry and ornaments with less expense. Some ancient artifacts do show signs of very thin gold or silver coatings that could have been applied this way, although no direct connection has ever been proven. Another possibility is that the Baghdad battery was used in healing rituals. In later centuries, Greek and Roman physicians experimented with electric fish to treat pain, believing the shocks could relieve ailments like gout or headaches. Could the people of Parthia or the Sassanid Empire have harnessed small electrical currents to experiment with similar treatments? Again, there is no definitive proof, only the tantalizing question. Of course, the more mysterious an object, the more fantastic the stories that grow up around it. Some suggest the batteries were evidence of a lost ancient civilization with knowledge far ahead of its time. Others spin tales of the batteries being part of arcane rituals or even evidence of contact with visitors from other worlds. While such stories are fascinating, they remain firmly in the realm of speculation. Modern experiments have shown that the Baghdad battery does work, at least in principle. Replicas using similar materials have generated voltages of about half a volt to a volt. It is not much by today's standards, but enough for small electrochemical reactions or mild sensations. Yet these same experiments also point out how limited the batteries would have been. Each cell would have produced only a tiny current, and multiple jars would have been needed to do anything practical. Even so, the idea that someone 2,000 years ago might have seen the flicker of a spark or felt the tingle of a mild shock is enough to stir the imagination. Today, the surviving pieces of the Baghdad battery sit quietly in the National Museum of Iraq, where they are often overlooked among grander treasures of Mesopotamia's golden age. Yet in their own way, they hold a secret as powerful as any royal tablet or statue, the reminder that human curiosity and experimentation are timeless. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine an ancient craftsman pouring vinegar into a small clay jar, watching as a metal rod dips into the liquid, waiting to see what happens. Perhaps he felt a slight warmth or saw tiny bubbles rise to the surface. Maybe he never fully understood what he had discovered, but he glimpsed a spark of something that would not be named for centuries to come. The Baghdad battery whispers to us from the past, reminding us that discovery does not always come in grand moments. Sometimes it flickers to life in the humblest of jars, waiting patiently for the day when someone would see its true potential and wonder just what else our ancestors knew that we have yet to rediscover. 19. The Roman dodecahedrons. Scattered across the old battlefields, buried farmlands, and ancient ruins of what was once the Roman Empire, small bronze objects have turned up for centuries that defy clear explanation. They are called Roman dodecahedrons, geometric curiosities about the size of a baseball, each one crafted with 12 flat pentagonal faces and curious knobs protruding from every corner. More than 100 of these artifacts have been found across Europe, from Britain and Belgium to Germany, France, and as far east as Hungary. And yet, for all their widespread discovery, no single ancient text or record so far uncovered has ever mentioned what they were meant for. Pick up a Roman dodecahedron, and you immediately sense the care that went into its creation. Each pentagonal face has a hole in the center, but the sizes of these holes vary slightly from face to face. The edges are finely cast in bronze, and the knobs that crown each vertex look like they were added for a reason, though no one knows exactly what that reason was. These objects date to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, when the Roman Empire was near its height. But unlike the statues, coins, and everyday tools that tell so much of Rome's story, the dodecahedrons sit in a category all their own, an everyday mystery that refuses to settle into just one tidy answer. The first theory that usually comes to mind is that these were some kind of measuring device. Some researchers suggest that the varying hole sizes could have helped Roman soldiers or farmers gauge the size of something round, like cannonballs or seed sizes, or even help in calibrating pipes. Others think they might have been used in surveying land or as sighting devices. And one idea holds that you could look through one hole and line up the opposite one to measure distance or angle, much like a simple rangefinder. Yet this theory has its limits. No two dodecahedrons are exactly alike in hole size or dimensions. Some show clear signs of careful casting and finishing, while others seem cruder, more ornamental than functional. If they were a standard tool, you would expect more uniformity and more surviving instructions or depictions of people using them. After all, the Romans were meticulous record keepers who documented everything from aqueduct blueprints to recipes for cooking dormice. Why not a single mention of this strange little object? Others believe the dodecahedrons were ritual objects or held symbolic significance. Some have been found in graves alongside other offerings, suggesting they might have been prized possessions or charms meant to protect the dead on their journey to the afterlife. The 12 faces might have held astrological or calendrical meaning. Perhaps the dodecahedron was connected to the zodiac or used by priests to track the movement of the stars. Its unusual shape alone would have made it stand out as something special in a world where geometry was already tied to ideas of divine order and the perfection of the heavens. One of the more playful theories is that these objects were simply toys or game pieces. Some researchers have noted that the dodecahedron's shape allows for interesting rolling patterns. Children or soldiers passing time on the frontier could have used them like dice, though no games or rules have ever been found. Another whimsical idea is that they could have been knitting tools. Some experiments show that by threading yarn through the holes, you can knit gloves with perfectly measured fingers, an idea that, while clever, is still debated. Adding to the puzzle is that these artifacts are almost entirely confined to what were then the outer edges of the Roman Empire. They appear in the lands of the Celts and Germanic tribes, far from the marble forums and grand villas of Rome itself. Some scholars believe they may have had a local or regional significance that never reached the urban centers of the empire. In these borderlands, where Roman legions met and mingled with local tribes, a unique blend of customs might have birthed this unusual object, whose meaning was clear to those who used it, but never important enough to write down. Today, Roman dodecahedrons rest in glass cases in museums across Europe, each one an open invitation to wonder. Some sit in neat rows, while others lie on velvet cushions that make them look like relics from a forgotten magician's kit. Visitors lean close, peering through the holes, imagining how it must have felt to hold such an object in your hand 2,000 years ago, its meaning known only to you and your people. As you drift off to sleep tonight, picture a Roman soldier at the edge of empire, perhaps in the chill mists of Britain or the forests of Gaul, turning a bronze dodecahedron over in his hand by firelight. Maybe he used it to measure the world around him, to tell the stars secrets, or to feel connected to something larger than the empire itself. Or maybe he simply rolled it like a charm, trusting that its 12 faces would keep some ancient promise. The Roman dodecahedron reminds us that the past is filled with things we may never fully understand, small reminders that even the greatest empires held secrets, some now held only by the earth and the stars overhead. 20. The Tomb of the Sunken Skulls. Deep in the quiet forests of southern Sweden, hidden beneath what was once a shallow lake, archaeologists made a discovery so haunting and so mysterious that it still baffles researchers today. This site, now known as the Tomb of the Sunken Skulls, reveals a ritual unlike anything seen elsewhere in Europe's Mesolithic past. Here, in the muddy bed of what was once a small lake or bog at the site of Canal-Jordan in Multala, human skulls were found mounted on wooden stakes and submerged underwater. Who were these people? Why were their heads displayed in this way? And what did it mean to the people who carefully placed them there more than 8,000 years ago? The discovery happened quite recently, in the early 2000s, when teams excavating for a railway project stumbled across artifacts sticking out of the peat. At first, they found bones of animals, wild boar, deer, and other prey that the hunter-gatherers of Mesolithic Sweden would have relied on. But then came something that stopped the excavation in its tracks: human skulls, some still pierced by sharpened wooden stakes that had been driven through their craniums from the base and out through the top. In total, the site revealed the remains of at least 11 people. Most were adults, both male and female, but 2 were children. Some skulls showed signs of healed injuries, suggesting these people lived through violent encounters long before they died. Other skulls had been deliberately broken open, perhaps as part of a ritual to remove the brain. What truly puzzled the researchers, however, was that this entire arrangement lay at the bottom of a shallow lake. Unlike a cemetery, where the dead are laid to rest in the earth, the Tomb of the Sunken Skulls was an offering to the water itself. After removing the flesh, the skulls were carefully placed on stakes and driven into the soft lake bed, standing upright in the murky depths. Around them lay other offerings: animal bones, stone tools, and other remnants of daily life. It seems clear that these objects, along with the skulls, were meant to be seen and perhaps revisited. But by whom, and for what purpose? One theory is that this was a sacred place, a watery boundary between the world of the living and the spirits. In many ancient cultures, water was seen as a passageway to other realms. Lakes, rivers, and bogs were places of mystery, where offerings were given to gods, ancestors, or unseen forces that governed nature. By placing skulls on stakes underwater, the people of Canal-Jordan may have believed they were giving these individuals a powerful position as guardians or messengers between worlds. Another idea suggests that these skulls belonged to respected members of the community, warriors, leaders, or elders, whose spirits were honored through this unusual ritual. The stakes could have served as a means to display their presence long after death, a constant reminder that these ancestors watched over the people who lived around the lake. But the healed injuries found on some skulls hint at another, darker possibility. Perhaps these were enemies taken in battle, their heads displayed as trophies to show power and protect the community from future threats. If so, the ritual would have been as much about intimidation as reverence. Yet, the careful arrangement of the site tells us this was no act of casual violence or random burial. The bodies were not simply discarded, they were defleshed with skill, the skulls cleaned and arranged with remarkable care. Some of the skulls contained pieces of other bones tucked inside them, an act that might have held deep symbolic meaning. Even today, no single interpretation feels complete, because the people who performed these rites left no written records or direct descendants to explain their customs. As with so many Mesolithic mysteries, we are left with clues frozen in the mud and our own human urge to piece them together. Standing at the edge of what was once that tranquil lake, it is easy to imagine the people who once gathered there. You can picture them wading into the shallow water, carrying the precious remains of their dead or defeated foes. Maybe they spoke quiet words to the spirits. Maybe they believed the water would carry those voices into the unseen world, ensuring balance, protection, or safe passage into what lay beyond. Today, the skulls and artifacts from Canal Jordan are preserved and studied by experts, hoping to unlock more secrets of Europe's distant past. Each new analysis of the bones and tools adds a fragment to the story, but the full picture remains as murky as the waters that once hid these skulls for thousands of years. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine that ancient lake in the pale light of dawn. Mist drifts across its surface, while stakes crowned with human skulls stand just below the rippling water, their empty eyes looking out into the forest. The tomb of the sunken skulls is a reminder that our ancestors saw the world differently, that for them, death was not an ending, but a threshold, and the lakes and forests they knew so well were places where the living and the dead could meet in quiet, timeless communion. 21. The Carnac Stones. In the misty fields of Brittany, in northwestern France, there stands one of the largest and most enigmatic prehistoric sites in Europe, a place where ancient stones march across the landscape in seemingly endless rows, forming patterns that have baffled researchers, travelers, and storytellers for centuries. These are the Carnac stones, an astonishing assembly of over 3,000 standing stones, or menhirs, that stretch for miles through farmland and rolling countryside. When you stand among these weathered granite sentinels, some towering 15 feet high, you cannot help but feel the hush of history pressing close. There is a stillness in the air that whispers of a time long before the written word, when the people who raised these stones had no cities, no empires, but possessed an understanding of the earth and sky that we are still trying to decode. The Carnac stones date back to the Neolithic period, with most estimates placing their erection between 4,500 and 5,500 years ago. That makes them older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Giza. Yet unlike those famous sites, Carnac is not a single monument. It is an entire landscape shaped by thousands of individual stones arranged into long, parallel alignments, stone circles, and clusters of burial mounds. One of the most remarkable features of Carnac is its alignments. The stones are set in rows that stretch across the countryside for more than 2 miles, creating a vast grid of granite markers. The largest alignments, such as the Mennik, Kermario, and Kurliskan rows, each contain hundreds of stones carefully placed with an almost mathematical precision. The stones vary in size, some standing shoulder high, others towering above even the tallest visitors, their rough surfaces etched with thousands of years of wind and rain. Why did these ancient people put so much effort into arranging these stones? For centuries, scholars and locals alike have proposed theories, some grounded in archaeology, others drifting into the realm of myth. Some believe that the alignments served as giant calendars or astronomical observatories, marking the cycles of the sun and moon, the changing seasons, or significant events in the heavens. Others think the stones may have outlined sacred pathways or processional routes used during rituals and gatherings that brought communities together in ways we can only imagine. Local folklore adds its own layer of wonder to the mystery. One legend tells that the Carnac stones are a Roman legion turned to stone by Merlin, the wizard of Arthurian myth, as they marched across Brittany. Another says they were ancient giants frozen in place for defying the gods. While these tales are fanciful, they reveal something true about how the stones have always stirred the imagination. Modern archaeological work has provided some clues, but no final answers. Excavations have uncovered traces of wooden structures and post holes near the stones, suggesting that the site was used repeatedly and adapted over generations. Burial mounds and dolmens nearby hint at a connection to the dead, perhaps making Carnac a place where the living and the spirits of ancestors met under the open sky. There are also signs that Carnac's builders understood how to harness the natural landscape. Many of the stones are aligned along gentle ridges and valleys, using the contours of the land to create an interplay of light and shadow as the sun moves across the sky. Some alignments seem to point toward distant landmarks, like the mountains to the north or the Gulf of Morbihan to the south. Perhaps these were not just random choices, but intentional links between earth and sky, water and stone. Walking through Carnac today, it is easy to feel both awe and humility. The stones stand in fields where sheep graze and wildflowers bloom, reminders that this land has been alive with human stories for thousands of years. Farmers and villagers have lived alongside these ancient markers for generations, often reusing stones for walls or roads, yet the heart of the alignments remains intact, a testament to their enduring power and mystery. As you drift to sleep tonight, picture the early morning mist curling around row upon row of standing stones, the soft light of dawn casting long shadows across the fields. Imagine the people who once walked these lines of granite, carrying torches or offerings, speaking prayers in a language lost to time. The Carnac stones remind us that the past is not always locked away in dusty books or behind museum glass. Sometimes it stands out in the open, enduring and silent, waiting for us to wander among its mysteries and wonder what it all once meant and what truths still lie hidden in the spaces between each ancient stone. 22. The Giants of Easter Island. To giants far out in the remote expanse of the South Pacific Ocean, over 2,000 miles from the nearest mainland, lies Easter Island, known to its native Polynesian inhabitants as Rapa Nui. This windswept volcanic island is famous around the world for its moai, the massive stone statues that stand watch across the grassy slopes and ancient platforms known as ahu. These silent giants, with their heavy brows, elongated noses, and solemn expressions, have gazed out over the island for centuries, their origins and meaning tangled in both legend and archaeological mystery. More than 800 moai have been documented on Rapa Nui, ranging in height from just a few feet tall to truly monumental figures towering over 30 feet. The largest statue ever carved, known as El Gigante, would have stood nearly 70 feet tall if it had been raised. Each moai was carved from volcanic tuff, a soft, workable stone found in the quarry at Rano Raku, a crater that remains dotted with unfinished statues, as if the carvers simply laid down their tools and vanished. Some moai still lie half buried in the quarry slopes, waiting like frozen giants that never made the journey to their final destinations. But how did the people of Rapa Nui, working with stone tools and no beasts of burden or wheels, move these multi-ton figures across the rugged terrain to the distant Ahu that line the island's coastline? This question has long fascinated researchers and fueled the enduring legend that the statues walked to their platforms. Oral tradition among the Rapa Nui people tells stories of the moai walking with the aid of mana, a spiritual force wielded by powerful priests or chiefs. To the people who created them, these statues were more than just stone effigies. They were the embodiment of deified ancestors, guardians whose mana protected the clan and the land. Raising and transporting a moai was therefore not only a technical challenge, but also a deeply spiritual act. Modern experiments have tried to untangle how this feat might have been accomplished. For decades, scholars assumed the islanders used sledges, rollers, or wooden rails, dragging the statues across log tracks, lubricated with palm oil or banana leaves. However, this idea has been challenged by more recent research, including fascinating experiments showing that a team using ropes and coordinated side-to-side rocking motions could make a statue appear to walk upright. In 2012, researchers successfully demonstrated this technique with a replica moai, inching it forward step by step like a giant stone puppet. This method matches the island's oral histories, blending cultural memory with practical engineering. Yet transporting the statues was only part of the challenge. Once a moai reached its destination, it had to be raised onto its ahu stone platforms that often stand several feet above the surrounding ground. Some moai were crowned with massive red stone topknots called pukao, which were carved from a different volcanic rock and added last. Lifting these heavy features into place would have required ramps, levers, and extraordinary teamwork. Sadly, the moai are more than just a testament to Rapa Nui's ingenuity. They are also a symbol of how delicate the balance between people and nature can be. Many researchers believe the island's ancient society suffered ecological collapse. Deforestation, soil erosion, and the loss of essential resources may have fueled conflict and toppled this once thriving culture. When European explorers first arrived in the 18th century, they found the moai standing, but the society that raised them weakened by war and disease. Many statues were later toppled during clan conflicts or colonial upheaval, and some were carried away to distant museums where they remain today. Yet Rapa Nui's story is not just one of decline, it is also one of resilience and revival. In recent decades, the island's people have worked to preserve their heritage, restore toppled moai, and revive their language and traditions. When you stand on the grassy plains beneath the towering gaze of a restored moai, you feel the deep presence of a culture that against all odds still endures. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine the people of Rapa Nui under a full moon, chanting and pulling on thick ropes as a great stone ancestor sways gently forward, step by step, on its long journey from the quarry to the coast. Picture the moai slowly rising on its ahu, its heavy stone eyes opening to the ocean that surrounds this small island in every direction. The giants of Easter Island remind us that human ingenuity, belief, and community can shape the impossible, and that some mysteries carved into stone and set against the endless sea will always keep us dreaming about what our ancestors knew and how they brought their visions to life. 23. The Bimini Road. Beneath the clear turquoise waters of the Bahamas, where sunlight dances on white sand and schools of fish drift lazily through coral gardens, lies a formation that has puzzled divers, geologists, and dreamers for decades. This submerged stretch of stones is known as the Bimini Road, a curious path of massive flat rocks resting just off the northwest coast of North Bimini Island. From above, it looks strikingly like a giant man-made road or seawall, its neatly aligned blocks stretching for about half a mile under the shallow sea. The Bimini Road first came to the world's attention in 1968, when a group of divers exploring the warm Bahamian shallows stumbled across the unusual line of stones. The divers found a long series of rectangular limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, lying side by side in a formation that seemed too precise to be random. Some blocks appeared to be stacked, while others formed a path that curved gently as it disappeared beneath deeper sand and water. The discovery made headlines, not just because it was visually striking, but because it seemed to breathe life into a legend that had fascinated people for centuries, the myth of Atlantis. In 1938, the famous American psychic Edgar Cayce had predicted that part of Atlantis would be discovered near Bimini in the late 1960s. So when divers found this road just 30 years later, believers in the lost continent saw it as proof that the prophecy had come true. To them, the Bimini Road was more than a pile of stones. It was a submerged ruin, evidence of an advanced civilization swallowed by the sea thousands of years ago. But what does science say about these underwater stones? Are they a roadway or breakwater built by an ancient people whose knowledge has been lost to time? Or are they simply an extraordinary example of nature's ability to mimic human design? Geologists who have studied the Bimini Road generally lean toward a natural explanation. The Bahamas sit atop vast layers of limestone bedrock, which over millennia can fracture and break apart in remarkable ways. One common geological process called jointing occurs when stress causes the limestone to split along parallel lines. Over time, these cracks widen and chunks of rock break off into neat rectangular shapes. Waves, tides, and chemical weathering help smooth the blocks and move them into new arrangements. Yet even geologists admit that the Bimini Road is unusual. Some stones appear to be propped up by smaller rocks underneath, which looks intentional. Other sections have sharp angles and straight edges that make them look as though they were shaped by human hands. Skeptics argue that the apparent order is just coincidence, that the human brain is naturally wired to see patterns, even when none exist. Adding to the mystery is the depth at which the Bimini Road lies. During the last ice age, sea levels were much lower than today. What is now shallow water near Bimini would have been dry land. If humans did live there, they might have built structures along the ancient coastline, only for them to be submerged as the ice melted and the seas rose. However, no tools, pottery shards, or other cultural artifacts have ever been found near the Bimini Road to confirm that humans were responsible for its creation. Despite the lack of hard evidence, the site continues to inspire explorers who believe that the Bimini Road is a piece of a much bigger puzzle. Some divers claim to have found additional formations nearby, stone circles, sunken walls, and other features they argue are parts of a lost city swallowed by the Atlantic. To date, no single discovery has turned the Bimini Road into definitive proof of a lost civilization, but the allure remains. For the people of Bimini, the road is more than a curiosity. It is part of the island's identity and folklore. Local guides tell visitors tales of the ancient seafarers who may have built it, or the spirits said to guard its secrets beneath the sea. Swimmers and snorkelers drift over the stones, tracing their hands along the smooth edges and feeling a quiet thrill that comes from touching something that might be far older than we can imagine. As you drift off to sleep tonight, picture the Bimini Road resting under the sun-dappled water, fish weaving through the shadows between its ancient blocks. Imagine what this place looked like when it was dry land, when people may have walked where parrotfish now swim. Whether it is a quirk of geology or a remnant of a forgotten people, the Bimini Road reminds us that some of Earth's greatest stories lie not in books but beneath the waves, waiting for curious minds to dive down and wonder what secrets might still sleep under the sea. 24. The Copper Scroll Treasure. Deep in the arid cliffs near the Dead Sea, hidden among caves that once sheltered rebels and mystics alike, a most unusual relic was found that continues to baffle historians, treasure hunters, and dreamers to this day. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, delicate parchment and papyrus inscribed with ancient prayers, laws, and community rules, this one is not made of fragile material. It is a scroll of hammered copper, etched with lines of Hebrew text that do not preach or prophesy, but instead read like a treasure map from a forgotten legend. This is the Copper Scroll, a relic that dares to claim there is a vast treasure hidden somewhere beneath the stones and sands of ancient Israel, waiting for someone brave and wise enough to find it. The Copper Scroll was discovered in 1952 in Cave 3 at Qumran, the same region where the more famous parchment Dead Sea Scrolls were unearthed. But from the start, the Copper Scroll was different. Unlike the biblical and sectarian writings that revealed the beliefs of the Essenes, the Jewish sect thought to have lived at Qumran, the Copper Scroll did not speak of law or faith. Instead, its inscribed lines listed location after location, each paired with precise measurements of gold, silver, and precious artifacts supposedly buried there. In all, the scroll mentions 64 hiding places, claiming a total treasure that some estimate could equal tons of precious metal and priceless ritual objects. The text is written in an unusual style of Hebrew, with spelling quirks and a blunt, almost matter-of-fact tone. It does not explain why the treasure was hidden or who originally buried it. It offers no comforting moral or religious context. It simply points again and again to cisterns, courtyards, reservoirs, and tombs, to places that, if they still exist, lie buried under layers of rock, soil, and centuries of human history. From the moment it was translated, the Copper Scroll ignited the imagination of archaeologists and adventurers alike. Some believe it describes the wealth of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, hidden away by priests to keep it from falling into Roman hands during the Jewish revolt of the 1st century. Others argue that it might record a far older hoard, perhaps the riches of Solomon's temple, before it was sacked by the Babylonians centuries earlier. There are even those who suggest the scroll may be nothing more than an elaborate riddle or symbolic text, never meant to be taken literally at all. But if the treasure is real, where is it? That question has driven countless expeditions and quiet solitary searches through the hills and caves of Israel and the West Bank. Many of the scroll's clues refer to places that no longer have clear modern equivalents. Ancient landmarks have shifted or disappeared. Place names have changed over thousands of years. Some clues are frustratingly vague, pointing to the cistern in the courtyard or the third conduit, details that might have made perfect sense to the scroll's authors, but are maddeningly incomplete to us now. And then there is the scroll's physical state. Unlike its parchment cousins, the Copper Scroll had to be cut into strips to be unrolled. Its surface is corroded, pitted by centuries underground, and parts of the text remain difficult to read. Even the best scholars sometimes disagree about keywords and measurements. Every mistranslation could lead a searcher hundreds of miles astray. Yet the allure persists. Stories abound of modern treasure hunters who have spent their lives trying to match the copper scroll's words to the landscape. Some claim to have come close, reporting sealed caves or suspicious ruins, only to be stopped by politics, funding, or the relentless uncertainty of digging into sacred and historically sensitive land. There are even whispers that small caches may already have been found and quietly removed, a handful of gold or silver taken by those who prefer to keep their discoveries out of the spotlight. Others believe that if the treasure ever existed, it may have been found long ago, its hoard carried off by conquerors or lost to time. After all, a buried treasure is only valuable if it remains hidden and forgotten, and perhaps that is part of what makes the copper scroll so powerful. Whether its riches lie waiting beneath the hills or only in the lines of its weathered copper surface, the scroll reminds us that the idea of lost treasure is timeless. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine the dry wind whispering through the caves of Qumran, rustling past the shadows where a scroll of beaten copper lay waiting for 2,000 years. Picture the priests or rebels who may have carried golden vessels under cover of darkness, burying their sacred riches in cisterns and tombs, leaving only this cryptic inventory behind. The copper scroll is more than a list. It is an invitation to wonder, to search, to dream about secrets buried in the earth and the stories that wait patiently to be found. The Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript, tucked away in the quiet, climate-controlled vaults of Yale University's Binecker Rare Book and Manuscript Library, lies one of the most perplexing books ever discovered. It is a modest-looking volume at first glance, bound in worn calfskin, its pages yellowed with age, but inside, the Voynich manuscript, named after Wilfrid Voynich, the rare book dealer who brought it to light in 1912, is like nothing else in the world. Its pages are filled with looping, elegant script written in an entirely unknown language, accompanied by bizarre, unidentifiable plants, naked figures bathing in pools, connected by strange plumbing, and astrological charts that hint at a cosmic significance just out of reach. What makes the Voynich manuscript so enduringly mysterious is that despite over a century of intense study, no one has been able to read a single word of it. Cryptographers, historians, linguists, and hobby codebreakers have all tried and failed. Even experts who cracked military codes in both world wars could not break its cipher. The letters do not match any known alphabet, and the words do not line up with the structures of any known language. Some sections appear to repeat phrases or symbols in rhythmic, almost poetic patterns, while others resemble the complex syntax of a real language, yet none can be traced back to any culture or region. The manuscript's origins are as shadowy as its content. Radiocarbon dating has placed the vellum, the animal skin pages, to the early 15th century, around the early 1400s. Some scholars believe it may have been created in northern Italy during the Renaissance, a time when Europe was alive with secret societies, coded letters, and alchemical manuscripts that blurred the line between science and magic. But the Voynich stands apart because no record exists of its author, its purpose, or how it was meant to be read. The illustrations offer clues, but they are just as confounding. The plants depicted throughout its pages do not match any known species on Earth. Botanists have searched for similarities, proposing that some leaves resemble Mediterranean herbs or Asian flowers, yet none can be conclusively identified. It is as if the plants were drawn from an imagined world, or perhaps from a real one, now lost. Then there are the human figures. dozens of women, often nude, appear in strange scenes that seem ritualistic or symbolic. They stand in pools connected by elaborate tubes and channels, as if bathing in a fantastical plumbing system or participating in a forgotten ceremony. Some pages combine these scenes with circular diagrams that resemble star charts, complete with zodiac symbols. Scholars debate whether these images represent an alchemical process, a medical text about herbal baths, or something more esoteric entirely. Because the Voynich manuscript has no known references in any historical archive before Voynich himself acquired it, conspiracy theories have flourished. Some argue that it is an elaborate hoax created by a clever medieval trickster hoping to sell a magical book to wealthy nobles. Others believe it was made by an unknown genius who invented a personal language to encode forbidden knowledge, perhaps about healing, astrology, or the philosopher's stone. There are even those who claim the manuscript is evidence of communication with otherworldly beings, or an artifact from an ancient civilization whose language and lore vanished long ago. In modern times, digital analysis has revealed new layers of intrigue. Statistical tests show that the text does not appear to be random gibberish. It shows patterns consistent with real language, including word frequency and distribution similar to natural speech. This means that if it is a hoax, it is a hoax of breathtaking complexity, far beyond what even the most ambitious forger in the 15th century could likely pull off. Still, the cipher remains unbroken. Machine learning algorithms have taken their turn at decoding it, and while some have claimed minor progress, no one has offered a solution that holds up to serious scrutiny. The manuscript remains what it has always been, a door locked tight, with no key yet found. For those who have handled the Voynich manuscript, it leaves a lasting impression. Its pages are full of delicate green ink, vibrant blues and reds, all carefully applied by a scribe who must have spent years hunched over the parchment, writing line after line of words no one would ever read, or perhaps words only a chosen few could understand. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine that unknown scribe working by candlelight in a stone chamber centuries ago, dipping a quill into ink and carefully shaping each curve and loop of a language no one else can speak. Picture the strange flowers blooming on the page, the women bathing in their otherworldly pools, the stars turning slowly in wheels drawn by a mind both brilliant and secretive. The Voynich manuscript reminds us that some mysteries are written not to be solved, but to keep us searching, to remind us that for every secret we unlock, there are countless more waiting in the shadows, whispering in a language only our dreams can begin to translate. 26. The Inca Rope Bridges. The Inca Rope Bridges. High in the rugged Andes Mountains, where snow-capped peaks cut into the sky and deep valleys carve the land into a breathtaking maze, ancient footpaths once connected an empire. These paths were part of the Capacnan, the vast road network that held the Inca civilization together. But even more astonishing than the roads themselves were the rope bridges, delicate yet sturdy structures woven entirely from grass and plant fibers that spanned roaring rivers and deep canyons. These were the Inca rope bridges, engineering marvels that carried people and goods across some of the most treacherous terrain on Earth. Long before modern suspension bridges, the Inca mastered the art of building these flexible lifelines. The idea seems simple at first glance: bundle grasses and other natural fibers into thick, sturdy cables, then anchor them to stone abutments on either side of a gorge. From these main cables, smaller ropes were suspended to create a walking surface and handrails. But simple does not mean easy. Each bridge required careful planning, immense communal labor, and precise knowledge passed down through generations. One of the most remarkable aspects of these bridges is their material. The Incas did not have iron tools or wheels, yet they found ways to use what nature provided in abundance. They harvested a tough, fibrous grass called ichu, found at high altitudes. Families and communities gathered each season to twist and braid this grass into ropes as thick as a man's arm. Then they wove these cables together like a giant braid, layering rope upon rope until the structure was strong enough to support caravans of llamas, traders carrying goods, and villagers walking to the next settlement. Building the bridges was a communal event as much as an engineering feat. Entire villages would gather to harvest the grass, twist the cords, and then stretch them across the canyon. Anchoring the cables securely to the bedrock on either side was crucial. Stones were carved with grooves or notches to hold the cables in place, and massive stone abutments were constructed to absorb the tension. Once the main cables were secure, the community would weave the decking, handrails, and side ropes, inch by inch until the bridge was complete. Maintaining these bridges was equally remarkable. The Andes are home to powerful winds, heavy rains, and dramatic temperature changes that would weaken the ropes over time. But instead of trying to make the bridges permanent, the Inca understood the value of renewal. Each bridge was rebuilt every year or so, depending on the wear and tear it faced. This tradition of rebuilding was not merely a practical necessity, but also a social and spiritual ritual that bound communities together. It was an act of collaboration and trust, each generation teaching the next how to craft a bridge strong enough to withstand nature's fury. One bridge that still survives this tradition is the Cuisahuachaca Bridge, which spans the Apurimac River in Peru. For more than 500 years, local communities have gathered every June to rebuild it entirely by hand, using the same techniques their ancestors did. The process begins with offerings to Pachamama, the Earth Mother, asking for protection and strength. Men weave the ropes while women braid the smaller cords, and teams on either side of the canyon carefully stretch and knot each piece into place. By the end of the festival, a new bridge swings gently above the river, ready to carry villagers for another year. Travelers who cross the Cuisahuachaca Bridge today describe the experience as both thrilling and humbling. The bridge sways with each step, the grass creaking underfoot, the river rushing far below. Yet there is a sense of safety in the weave, a connection to centuries of hands that shaped, tested, and renewed this lifeline. It is living history, not locked away in stone or forgotten ruins, but carried forward by the people who still depend on it. Historians marvel at the sheer ingenuity of these rope bridges. They allowed the Inca Empire to thrive in one of the world's most challenging landscapes, connecting isolated villages with trading routes, military roads, and sacred sites. Even today, modern engineers study these ancient bridges for inspiration, seeing how flexible materials and communal care can create structures that last not because they resist nature, but because they work with it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine standing at the edge of a deep Andean gorge, the wind whipping through your hair, the scent of fresh grasses all around. Villagers stand together, laughing and working, their fingers deftly weaving rope from the earth's own fibers. Piece by piece, they stretch a bridge across the canyon, connecting not just two cliffs, but generations of knowledge and hope. The Inca rope bridges remind us that strength does not always lie in steel and concrete. Sometimes it lies in the humble strands of grass, twisted together by hands that remember what it means to trust each other and to honor the land that holds them up. Derinkuyu Underground City. Derinkuyu Underground City. Enlinar Water Speak. Beneath the rugged landscape of Cappadocia in central Turkey lies a hidden world so vast and intricate that it seems like something from a forgotten legend. This is Derinkuyu, an ancient underground city that once sheltered thousands of people in a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers carved deep into the soft volcanic rock. When you stand on the dusty plains above, you would never suspect that beneath your feet lies a multi-level metropolis stretching more than 200 feet down into the earth. Derinkuyu is not just a single cave or a simple hideout. It is an engineering marvel, a testament to human ingenuity and survival in a harsh and unpredictable world. At its peak, this underground city could house as many as 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food stores. Imagine that for a moment, an entire small town living, working, cooking, and praying in spaces carved entirely by hand, hidden from the eyes of invaders and the biting winds above. The story of Derinkuyu begins with the unique geology of Cappadocia. The region's soft volcanic tuff is easy to dig, yet stable enough to hold its shape for centuries. Early settlers realized they could carve into this stone to create cool, protective spaces. Over time, what may have begun as simple storage rooms and shelters grew into complex subterranean cities. Derinkuyu is the largest of these, a sprawling maze of tunnels that winds down through 18 known levels, though only about half of them are open to visitors today. Walking through Derinkuyu is like stepping back into a hidden chapter of history. Narrow corridors twist and turn, opening up into communal rooms, kitchens, wine presses, stables, and even chapels carved from the rock. One of the most remarkable features of the city is its ventilation system. Ingenious shafts drilled down from the surface keep fresh air circulating throughout the levels, ensuring that even deep underground, people could breathe easily. Some of these shafts double as wells, providing precious water to sustain the community for long periods. Perhaps the most fascinating parts of Derinkuyu are its defenses. Life in ancient Cappadocia was often threatened by marauding armies and sudden invasions. The region's strategic location between powerful empires meant that safety was never guaranteed. When danger loomed, entire families could retreat into the depths, pulling massive circular stone doors into place behind them. These doors, some weighing over 1,000 pounds, could be rolled into position to block tunnels completely, sealing off passageways from intruders. Small holes in the doors allowed defenders to spear enemies or watch for movement without exposing themselves. Archaeologists believe that Derinkuyu may have been built and expanded in phases by different cultures over centuries, from the Phrygians to the early Christians. Its use as a refuge was not just for a single threat, but an enduring strategy passed down through generations. When armies swept across the region, the people of Derinkuyu simply vanished into the rock, waiting until it was safe to emerge. Inside the city, traces of everyday life can still be felt. Deep rooms served as communal kitchens where families cooked food. Storage chambers held grain and wine, kept cool and dry by the constant underground temperature. Chapels carved into the stone provided spaces for prayer and gatherings, their simple crosses and altars illuminated by oil lamps. The largest rooms could have been schools or meeting halls where people gathered to share news and make plans during long stays underground. What makes Derinkuyu even more remarkable is that it is not alone. Throughout Cappadocia, more than 200 smaller underground complexes have been found, some connected by tunnels that stretch for miles beneath the rocky landscape. Derinkuyu itself is said to be linked by a tunnel to the nearby city of Kaimakli, another subterranean wonder that once protected thousands of people. Today, visitors descend into Dorinkuyu's shadowy passages, ducking through low doorways and climbing down steep stone steps. The air is cool and dry, carrying whispers of a time when entire communities trusted these caverns with their lives. It is humbling to stand in these ancient rooms and imagine the flicker of torchlight on the walls, the murmur of voices drifting through narrow corridors, the steady beat of hammers carving ever deeper into the earth. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine the people of Derinkuyu carrying baskets of grain through the tunnels, gathering in small rooms to share bread and stories, children's laughter echoing softly in the chambers below. Picture the great stone doors rolling silently into place as the city disappears from the world above, hidden and safe. The underground city of Derinkuyu reminds us that sometimes the greatest feats of human ingenuity are not towering monuments or grand palaces, but the quiet, enduring spaces that hold communities together when the world above turns dangerous and uncertain. It is a testament to how far people will go to protect one another, even if it means carving an entire world beneath their feet. 28. The Olmec Colossal Heads. Scattered across the lush lowlands and humid jungles of Mexico's Gulf Coast lie some of the most striking and mysterious relics of the ancient world, the Olmec Colossal Heads. These enormous stone sculptures, each carved from a single massive boulder of basalt, stand as silent sentinels of a civilization that thrived thousands of years ago, yet left behind no written explanation for why they created such monumental works. The heads, with their distinct features, helmet-like headgear, and powerful expressions, continue to capture the imagination of archaeologists and ordinary people alike, inviting endless questions about who these faces represent and how they came to rest in the places they do. The Olmec civilization, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, flourished along the Gulf Coast of what is now Veracruz and Tabasco between roughly 1500 and 400 BCE. Long before the Maya and the Aztec rose to power, the Olmec laid many of the cultural foundations of the region: complex urban centers, ceremonial platforms, pyramid-like mounds, and an artistic style that would influence generations to come. But of all the artifacts they left behind, none are as iconic or as puzzling as the colossal heads. To stand before one of these giant heads is to feel the weight of both stone and history. The largest of them reaches over 11 feet tall and weighs up to 50 tons. Each head is unique, with individual facial features, expressions, and intricate headgear that suggests these were portraits of powerful figures, likely rulers or revered ball players, according to some interpretations. The faces are broad, with flat noses and full lips, staring out with a timeless calm that feels both regal and human. The mystery begins not just with the faces themselves, but with the sheer logistics of creating and moving them. The basalt boulders used for these heads came from the Sierra de los Tuxtlas Mountains, sometimes more than 50 miles away from where the heads were eventually found. How did the Olmec move these enormous stones through dense jungle, across rivers, and over marshy ground without the use of beasts of burden, wheels, or metal tools? Scholars believe they must have used an ingenious combination of rafts, log rollers, ropes, and sheer human determination, mobilizing entire communities for the task. Once the boulders arrived at their destination, they were painstakingly carved using only stone tools, hammerstones and chisels made of harder rock. This was not a quick or casual process. Each head shows signs of careful shaping, smoothing, and finishing. The details of the helmets, Ear spools and facial features reveal the skill of artists who knew how to work the unforgiving basalt into something that would endure for millennia. What did these heads mean to the Olmec? The answer remains elusive. Some researchers believe the colossal heads are portraits of powerful rulers meant to project their authority and immortalize their presence for future generations. Others suggest the helmets hint at an important role in the sacred Mesoamerican ball game, which was not only a sport but also a ritual that carried deep cosmological and political meaning. The intense gaze and the sense of individuality in each face suggest these were not generic figures, but real people whose names have been lost to time. Excavations at major Olmec sites like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tresopolis have uncovered these heads in a variety of contexts, some standing prominently in ceremonial plazas, others buried or deliberately defaced. This has led some scholars to wonder whether the heads were sometimes ritually buried or moved as political power shifted between centers. The practice hints at complex beliefs about leadership, ancestry, and the connection between the living and the dead. The colossal heads also spark larger questions about how the Olmec viewed the world and their place in it. To create art on such a scale required immense social organization and labor, suggesting a society with powerful leaders capable of commanding vast workforces. Yet beyond the monumental heads, so much about the Olmec remains cloaked in mystery. We have no surviving texts that record their stories, only the artifacts and the shadows they cast through time. Today, the colossal heads stand as enduring symbols of the strength and vision of the Olmec civilization. Some remain in situ, half sheltered under protective roofs, while others reside in museums where visitors can stand face to face with these ancient portraits. To gaze upon an Olmec head is to feel a connection across thousands of years, to wonder about the hands that carved it, the people who honored it, and the rulers whose visages stare calmly back at us through the centuries. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine the Olmec craftsmen chipping away at massive stones under the dappled light of a jungle canopy. Picture whole communities gathering to witness the unveiling of these giant faces, seeing in their features the power and memory of their leaders. The Olmec colossal heads remind us that even when words are lost, the human desire to remember and to be remembered endures, carved forever in stone, waiting for us to stand before them and ask what stories they still hold. If you enjoyed wandering through these ancient secrets with me tonight, I'd love for you to keep exploring alongside the Snoozy Scientist. Tap that like button if you're curious for more, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss a new journey into the world's most puzzling wonders. And I'd really love to hear from you. Which of these ancient mysteries do you think will ever be solved? Or do you believe some secrets are meant to stay hidden? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, keep dreaming, keep wondering, and remember, sometimes the past is closer than you think, just waiting for you to listen.